Hi guys. Tonight we are stepping into a world where breath fogs before your lips, where the forest groans under ice, and the only thing standing between you and the endless dark is a few rough-hewn logs. You probably won't survive this, not without a little luck and a lot of heat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. You push open the cabin door and step into the frozen silence of the early American frontier. The snow outside glows faintly under a ghostly moon, and the cold bites instantly through your coat. The air smells like pine, smoke, and the iron taste of survival. Your boots crunch on frost, and each exhale hangs in front of you before drifting upward, vanishing into the black void above the treetops. This is no postcard winter. This is the kind that takes your breath, your feeling, maybe even your future. Imagine standing on the edge of wilderness in 1780, when towns were days apart, and supplies from the east took weeks to reach the new frontier. You have a few tools, an axe, a hope for spring, and maybe a partner beside you, equally terrified. The land feels endless, untamed, both a promise and a threat. And when the first snow comes early, you understand that warmth is not comfort. It is survival itself. You bend down to test the ice forming on your water bucket. It's already solid. Inside your log shelter, the fire smolders weakly, glowing like an eye in the dark. Sparks leap from the embers, rising toward a chimney that barely draws. The smoke hangs low, stinging your eyes. You cough, squint, and crouch closer, rubbing your hands together. The flames crackle, whispering a rhythm older than any song you know. Historians still argue whether settlers truly understood how deadly those winters would be when they pushed west. Some claim they romanticized hardship, dreaming of fertile land and freedom. Others believe they knew exactly what awaited them, but went anyway, driven by desperation or faith. Either way, the first lesson was always the same: build fast, build tight, and pray your roof holds. You look around your rough shelter. The logs are freshly cut, their bark still clinging in strips. The gaps between them leak thin blades of cold air that you can feel even across the room. You press your palm to the wall and feel it, the pulse of the outside world, a slow, freezing heartbeat pressing in. It's almost like the wilderness is breathing against you, testing whether you belong here. The smell of resin and sap lingers from your day's work. Your shoulders ache from swinging the axe. Every muscle in your arms burns with the memory of chopping. You think about the settlers who didn't make it, the ones buried beneath drifts of snow before their cabins were finished. Some diaries speak people freezing while sitting upright beside a dead fire, their faces peaceful, as if warmth had slipped quietly away in the night. Others tell of families digging into snowbanks like animals, praying for morning. You stir the coals and watch the glow brighten. The color shifts from deep red to bright orange, a small sun reborn. It's hypnotic, calming, almost human in its persistence. You can hear the logs crack, see tiny sparks leap like fireflies. For a moment, the cold recedes. This is what kept so many settlers alive, not just the fire itself, but the ritual of tending it, feeding it, talking to it. One old letter even mentions a man who thanked his hearth each night before sleep, whispering to the flame as though it could understand. Out here, everything feels closer to the bone. You taste the smoke on your tongue. You feel the rough grain of the logs under your fingertips. You hear the slow creak of wood expanding in the cold. The whole cabin seems to breathe with you, groaning and sighing, settling deeper into the earth. Somewhere outside, an owl calls. The sound echoes, lonely and low. You pull your blanket tighter. It's strange to think that this simple structure, 4 walls, a roof, a fire, represents the edge between civilization and chaos. Back east, people speak of luxury, brick houses, glass windows, warm bread. Here, warmth is whatever you can trap. and comfort is the absence of wind on your neck. You catch yourself smiling bitterly. Civilization feels like a dream you once had and forgot the ending to. There's a kind of peace in this too, when you know that every piece of heat is earned, that every ember was chopped, split, and carried. You feel something ancient stirring inside. Your ancestors, whoever they were, must have known this feeling too. That quiet thrill when the fire takes. That relief when the cold gives up, even for a moment. Outside, the forest creaks. A branch snaps under the weight of snow. You imagine wolves moving silently between the trees, noses lifted, catching the faint scent of smoke from your chimney. You don't fear them, not tonight. You have your flame, your four walls, and the stubborn hope that spring will come again. But as you watch the fire fade and lie back on your rough bedding, you realize something unsettling. This is only the beginning. Winter hasn't even begun to show its teeth. You will need more wood, better insulation, stronger walls. You will learn, as every pioneer did, that the fight for warmth is not a one-time battle. It's a nightly negotiation with the elements. Somewhere in your half-sleep, you remember a strange tidbit you heard from an old trapper, that some settlers believed the cold carried voices, that if you listened just right, the wind could speak the names of those who froze before you. You tell yourself it's nonsense. And yet, as the wind presses against your windowless wall, you could swear it murmurs something faint and familiar. You turn toward the fading fire, eyelids heavy. The orange light flickers across your face, painting warmth where there is none. You think about tomorrow, about chopping, mending, surviving. And as sleep pulls you under, you whisper your own small prayer to the flame, hoping it still burns when morning comes. You wake to a sound like frozen thunder, a sharp crack that rattles the walls. For a moment you think it is a gunshot, but then you realize it is the forest itself, splitting open under the cold. The timbers of your cabin answer with their own low groan, as if the whole structure is stretching in pain. You pull yourself from under the blanket, feeling the night's chill still clinging to your breath. Outside, dawn is little more than a pale shimmer behind grey clouds. Today, you must chop. It is not a choice, but an instinct. In this wilderness, firewood is the currency of life, and each log is worth more than gold. You pick up your axe, its handle smooth from use, and step into the brittle morning air. The frost has crept across every surface, painting even the axe blade in white lace. The cold burns your lungs, but it keeps you sharp, awake, aware. Historians still debate how early settlers managed to fell so many trees with such crude tools. Some claim that frontier men carried axes forged in England or the Carolinas, tempered better than local iron. Others argue they simply compensated with endurance, swinging until their arms went numb. Either way, it was back-breaking work. You approach a tall pine, its bark dusted with snow, and plant your feet wide. The first swing lands with a hollow thunk that vibrates through your chest. Chips fly, sharp and fragrant, releasing the sweet smell of resin. Each blow echoes through the woods, startling a crow from its perch. You strike again and again until sweat steams from your skin. The world narrows to rhythm. Breathe, swing, impact. It takes longer than you expect for the tree to lean. You pause to rest, hearing the faint hiss of your breath in the cold air. Finally, the trunk shudders, then falls with a thunderous crash, shaking snow loose from nearby branches. For a few seconds afterward, there is perfect silence, as if the world itself is catching its breath. You touch the fallen bark and feel a strange mixture of triumph and guilt. This tree stood for decades before your axe met it, but now it will keep you alive. You understand now why pioneers often spoke of trees as both enemies and saviors. They blocked sunlight, stole farmland, and hid wolves, yet their wood built your walls and fed your fire. You begin to limb the trunk, working steadily, breaking branches, stacking them into a rough pile. Your fingers sting, then go numb, and you blow on them between strokes. The snow deepens around your boots, swallowing sound. There is no birdsong now, only the crisp crackle of frost breaking underfoot. By noon, Your arms tremble from exhaustion. You drag what log you can back toward the cabin, leaving a trail of steam rising from your body in the icy air. Each piece will need splitting, stacking, drying. The pioneers called it the wood chore, but it was more than a chore, it was a season-long ritual of endurance. Some diaries mention that settlers measured winter not by days but by cords of wood remaining. When that pile ran low, fear began to creep in. You pause to drink from your canteen, the water half frozen. The taste is metallic, tinged with smoke from the nearby fire pit. You wipe your mouth and look around at the forest. It stretches endless in every direction, a sea of trunks and shadows. You can almost imagine the first people who walked these lands long before you, Native Americans who also knew how to listen to trees, how to read their strength, how to burn their hearts for warmth. There's a strange fringe story that some pioneers swore by singing wood, certain trees that cracked in rhythm when the temperature dropped, as if warning of storms to come. Whether superstition or truth, it gave comfort to those alone in the woods, a feeling that the forest was speaking back. You wonder if you will learn to hear it too. Back at the cabin, you split the logs with methodical patience. The axe bites deep. Wood bursts apart in satisfying halves. Each swing builds heat in your muscles. Soon your breath comes in clouds, and sweat runs down your back. The rhythm becomes almost meditative. You can see how some settlers claimed chopping kept their minds from despair. It was physical prayer, one stroke at a time. By dusk, the pile outside your door has grown tall enough to lean against. It looks like victory, but you know it will burn away faster than you hope. Firewood vanishes like time. You will need double this before the thaw. You step inside the cabin and stamp snow from your boots. The smell of smoke and pine greets you again. You throw 2 fresh logs onto the hearth, and they hiss as sap boils. Sparks leap, the flames stretch, and a wave of warmth rolls across the room. You sink onto the stool, rubbing your stiff hands. Historians argue over whether the pioneers' obsession with chopping wood was simply necessity or also psychological. Some see it as a form of control over an unpredictable world. When so much of life was uncertain, crops, weather, illness, the axe was one thing that always obeyed. Each swing was proof of power, a small victory against the cold universe. Outside, the wind howls through the trees, a voice that seems almost human. Inside, you feel the pulse of heat rising from your labor, a reward more immediate than any sermon or promise of heaven. The room flickers in amber light. You can hear the logs popping, shifting, exhaling their stored summer warmth. You lean back, eyelids heavy. Tomorrow you will need to cut more. The forest will still be waiting, endless and patient. But for now, you allow yourself this fragile comfort. The ache in your arms, the warmth on your face, the faint whisper of burning pine, they remind you that for one more night, you have earned your place in this frozen world. The morning comes slow and silver, light slipping through cracks in the log walls like threads of frost. You wake to the sound of your own breath, the rhythm steady, soft, almost musical. Every inch of the cabin is coated in cold. The water bucket has frozen solid again, and your blanket smells faintly of smoke. Outside, the forest waits in its frozen silence, but inside, another task demands your hands. It is time to stack the walls tighter, to seal your fragile fortress against the kind of wind that could sneak through a needle's eye. You stand, stretch, and run your palm along the logs of your cabin. They are rough, uneven, and proud, each scar and knot a mark of work already done. Records from the period suggest that many settlers learned log construction not from formal plans but from imitation. One man watched another, memorized the angles, and copied them. Some cabins were perfect, snug and square, while others leaned drunkenly against the wind, whistling their floors each night. You push open the door and step outside. Your tools lean beside the woodpile. The air is biting enough to make your eyes water. You grab the mallet and start checking the seams of the walls, tapping where daylight shows through. Every small gap is an invitation for winter to creep in. You wedge bits of bark, moss, or dried clay, whatever the forest and your hands can offer. The sound of hammering echoes faintly, swallowed by snow-covered pines. A curious belief floated among settlers that a perfectly tight cabin was bad luck, that air needed to breathe through the walls or sickness would settle inside. Others scoffed, saying that gaps were death traps for babies and livestock alike. You find yourself halfway between superstition and sense, packing what you can but leaving just enough space to imagine luck might pass through. Scholars still puzzle over where pioneers first learned their stacking techniques. Some argue it came from Scandinavian immigrants who carried with them the knowledge of timber interlocking. Others point towards Slavic designs, or the lessons borrowed from native tribes whose dwellings balanced ventilation and warmth long before Europeans arrived. Whatever its origin, this art of fitting log to log became the language of survival. You crouch and study the corners. Each intersection of timber locks with another, notched carefully so the weight presses inward rather than outward. It is satisfying in a simple, solid way. You can almost hear your heartbeat in the wood. The scent of sap clings to your hands. Every tap of your mallet is a small defiance of the cold. Inside the cabin, smoke curls lazily from the hearth. You watch how it slides along the ceiling before escaping through cracks you still need to seal. The fire glows faintly, feeding on yesterday's effort. Its warmth barely reaches your feet, but it is enough to remind you that life is holding on. You remember something you once read in a traveler's letter, that log walls, when newly cut, shrink as they dry, closing their own seams through winter. That idea feels like mercy, the forest itself lending a hand to keep you alive. Perhaps that is why so many pioneers spoke of their cabins as living things, almost companions. They groaned, sighed, and settled, much like their owners. The hours slip by as you work. The rhythm becomes familiar, calming even. You can feel the walls changing under your hands, stiffening, growing more complete. Snow begins to fall again, gentle and steady. The flakes melt on your skin, cold little ghosts that vanish before you can study them. You hum softly without realizing it, your breath joining the sound of the falling snow. A traveller's diary from 1794 described this same kind of labor as a quiet madness. He wrote of men and women so focused on their cabins they forgot to speak, so consumed by the need to shut out the cold that silence became their only warmth. You understand that now. Building and rebuilding is not just about the walls, it is about control, about shaping chaos into something that looks like safety. By late afternoon, your back aches and your fingers are raw. You rest for a moment on a split log, listening to the forest breathe. The snow muffles all noise. The stillness feels almost sacred. Somewhere in that hush, you imagine the faint creak of another cabin not far away, another pair of hands fighting the same invisible enemy. The light fades early, as it always does in winter. You return inside and close the door. The new insulation dulls the sound of wind to a low hum. It feels different now, less like a threat, more like distant music. You sit by the fire and stretch your legs, feeling the blood turn to your feet in slow, painful warmth. No one truly understood the loneliness that lived inside these walls unless they had been here. The journals, the letters, even the old folklore all describe it. The sound of wind and wood whispering together, the echo of your own heartbeat amplified by emptiness. Some frontiersmen claimed they could tell when another family died nearby because the woods grew quieter, as if grief could change the weather. Whether true or not, the idea lingers in your mind, soft and strange. The fire pops. You toss on another log and watch it catch, the flames licking upward like slow dancers. You lean back, eyes half closed, tracing the lines of the walls you built with your own hands. They are uneven, imperfect, but they hold. The warmth gathers in small circles around you, delicate as breath. You know the cold is still waiting outside, patient and endless. But for now, it cannot reach you. You smile faintly and think of spring. When the melt comes, you will see how well the walls survived. Some will bow inward, some will crack. But tonight, this cabin stands. You can almost believe it is proud of you. The morning greets you with the soft whisper of snow settling on the roof. The world feels muted, as if wrapped in cotton. When you push the door open, the cold brushes your face like a warning, sharp and immediate. It is time to seal the last cracks, the thin gaps that leak warmth like sand slipping through fingers. Today you will mix chinking, that strange frontier concoction that stands between comfort and frostbite. You kneel beside a wooden bucket filled with a messy blend of clay, straw, moss, and mud. Your hands are stiff, but you scoop and stir. The texture gritty and damp. The smell is earthy, ancient, familiar in a way you cannot quite explain. According to letters written by settlers in the Ohio Valley, this paste was considered a kind of frontier alchemy. It turned the forest floor into walls, dirt into shelter, wilderness into home. You spread the mixture between the logs, pressing it deep with your fingers. The cold mud bites at your skin, but soon the friction warms your palms. The rough texture fills the gaps where the wind used to whisper. You hum softly as you work, the sound muffled by the cabin walls. Bit by bit, your home becomes tighter, stronger, more resistant to the cruel season pressing in. There is an odd bit of folklore claiming that some families hid charms inside their chinking buttons, carved stones, even small bones to protect the cabin from evil spirits that prowled the winter dark. You do not know whether to laugh or to believe it. A small piece of you wonders if such superstitions came not from fear of ghosts but from fear of silence. Researchers continue to disagree about how effective these chinking materials really were. Some point to archaeological remains of cabins where clay still clings centuries later, proof of their strength. Others argue that most mixtures crack within weeks, forcing settlers to patch them again and again. Whatever the truth, you can feel the difference immediately. The breeze that once crept through the walls has gone still. The fire's warmth begins to stay trapped inside, curling around you like an invisible blanket. You glance toward the hearth, where smoke curls lazily upward. The scent of pine pitch and faintly singed moss fills the air. The light glows warm against the wooden walls, dancing across rough textures. For the first time, you can imagine sleeping through a night without waking to numb fingers. A curious account from a Pennsylvania family describes using mashed animal dung as part of their mix when other materials ran out. It sounds horrific, but the truth was simple. Anything that dried hard and sealed tight was worth trying. The line between practicality and disgust blurred easily when survival was at stake. You pause to stretch, your back protesting from crouching too long. Outside, the snow continues to fall, fine and steady. The quiet feels like a gift. Even the forest seems to sleep under its white quilt. You lean against the doorway, looking at the trees bending under their icy burden. There is a beauty in their endurance, a lesson in patience. The logs of your cabin glisten with moisture. When you step back inside, the difference is striking. The air feels stiller, thicker, more contained. You hold your hands over the fire, feeling the warmth spread into your palms. The chinking has turned your rough shelter into something close to comfort. One travel journal from 1803 mentions how families often worked together to finish this task before deep winter, turning it into a kind of communal ritual. Men chopped, women mixed, children stomped straw into mud with bare feet, laughing despite the cold. The writer called it the dance of survival, a phrase that lingers in your mind. You imagine the laughter echoing across snowy hillsides, the joy of creating warmth together. You decide to add a bit more to the lower seams, crouching once again. The smell of clay and smoke mixes with the faint scent of tallow from last night's candles. It is not pleasant, but it is real, grounding. Each press of mud feels like defiance. Each gap filled is one less place for death to slip through. The fire pops suddenly, startling you. Sparks leap toward the ceiling before fading. You smile, reminded that even flame has its moods. You sit for a while, watching the light play over the uneven surface of your handiwork. It is imperfect, messy, alive. Later, as night descends, you run your fingertips along the seams, testing for drafts. There are still tiny leaks, but most of them are gone. You can almost hear your cabin sigh in relief. You lay another log on the fire and listen to the snow hissing against the roof. The sound is soft, steady, hypnotic. Some pioneers claimed they could tell the health of their home by how the fire behaved. If the smoke rose straight, the cabin was sealed well. If it curled back toward the floor, the walls were whispering secrets of weakness. Tonight, the smoke rises clean and sure. You take that as a good sign. As you stretch out on your straw mattress, you let your mind wander. The mud beneath your fingers earlier still clings faintly to your skin, its smell earthy and human. You think about how every handful of that mixture connects you to thousands of forgotten hands that shaped warmth from dirt before you. The thought is oddly comforting. Outside, the forest sighs again, the wind searching for any path inward. But tonight, it finds none. You close your eyes and smile at the muffled quiet. The cold may own the world beyond these walls, but for now, this little cabin belongs entirely to you. The day begins in a haze of pale gold light, leaking through the smoke-stained cracks above the hearth. Your body is stiff from sleep, but the smell of last night's ashes lingers, warm and comforting. The cabin feels alive with faint creaks and sighs, wood expanding as the fire wakes again. You kneel and stir the embers, watching the faint orange glow spark back to life. The heart of survival, after all, is never letting that small light die. You toss on a handful of bark shavings, then a few slender twigs. The smoke thickens, curling like a restless spirit. The flame takes hold slowly, licking upward, turning red into gold. Soon the crackle fills the silence, steady as breath. You rub your hands together, leaning close, the heat kissing your cheeks. The air smells like pine resin and yesterday's labor. Letters from settlers often describe this daily fire ritual as the true beginning of morning. One woman from the Kentucky frontier wrote that she prayed not to any saint, but to the mercy of flame. The fire was friend, servant, and sometimes enemy. To lose it in winter meant panic. To feed it was worship in motion. You step outside briefly to fetch more wood. The world is a blank page, snow smoothing every edge. The forest glows faintly under the sun, light bouncing off every surface. Your boots crunch through the crusted layer, and each breath forms tiny clouds that drift away like ghosts. You carry a small bundle back, careful not to spill the few coals you had preserved overnight in a clay pot near the hearth. It is strange to think that your life can depend on something as small as a glowing ember. Inside, the flames grow brighter, licking up the soot-darkened stones. The warmth spreads unevenly, creating little islands of comfort within the room. You set a pot of water nearby to thaw, and listen to the gentle hiss as ice gives way. The sound is soothing, a tiny victory against the endless freeze. A curious account from a traveling minister tells of families who passed fire from house to house, carrying coals in covered pans if their own hearth went cold. Fire was a kind of community currency, borrowed and shared. Imagine the small relief of seeing a neighbor appear through the snow, face red with wind, holding out a glowing coal wrapped in rags, a spark carried in human hands. Experts still debate how efficient early fireplaces actually were. Some argue that most heat was lost up the chimney, that cabins remained icy except for the few feet closest to the flames. Others believe settlers learned to adapt, building lower ceilings and angled hearths that reflected warmth. You can feel the truth in both sides. The fire burns bright, yet the corners of the room still hum with cold. You feed the flames again, and watch the colors shift from orange to blue at the base, where the air feeds strongest. There is something hypnotic about it, something deeply human. Every civilization has gathered around fire, and now it is your turn. You lean forward and rest your chin in your hands, your eyes tracing the flicker. The noise is steady and soft, like a heartbeat inside the walls. Sometimes the smoke behaves strangely, rolling downward instead of up. You fan it away, coughing as the acrid scent fills your lungs. For a few moments, your eyes water. It reminds you that this fragile comfort has its own dangers. Diaries from frontier towns describe entire cabins burning to the ground from one misplaced ember, often in the dead of night. The same flame that warms you can erase you. You open the door slightly to let air flow. The wind rushes in, sharp as a knife, curling around your ankles. You shiver, but the fire steadies again, rising taller. The balance between air and heat feels like taming a wild thing. You close the door and sit back, letting the warmth reclaim the space. An old superstition said that a fire that cracked loudly was speaking to you, warning of weather changes. The louder the snap, the closer the storm. You listen for it now, counting each pop as if decoding a secret message. The rhythm becomes familiar, a kind of slow conversation between human and flame. The smell of burning pine fills the cabin completely now, sweet and resinous. You breathe it in deeply. It smells like safety, but also like effort. Every spark is a reminder of yesterday's work in the woods, of every swing of your axe, every bruise, every splinter. It is the scent of survival earned, not given. You shift closer to the fire and hold your hands open, palms glowing orange in the light. You feel the sting fade from your fingers as blood flows again. The skin on your knuckles is cracked and raw, but the pain is a kind of pleasure. It means you are still here. Outside, the snow begins again, soft and unhurried. You can hear it through the walls, a faint whispering sound. You imagine each flake as a wordless prayer, the sky's slow apology for the cold it delivers. Inside, your world is a circle of light, the fire painting everything in amber. Some pioneers believed that if the last flame of the night died before sunrise, misfortune would follow the next day. So they tended it through the small hours, half asleep, adding twigs and coals, keeping the ember alive like a fragile heartbeat. You think of them now, thousands of unseen souls who fed the same kind of light, who whispered to their fires in languages now forgotten. You stir the coals once more and watch sparks fly like tiny stars. Outside, winter presses closer, but here within your rough walls, you hold the sun in your hands. The chimney coughs. You hear it before you see it, a strange low groan that seems to rise from deep inside the hearth. A thin trail of smoke curls out, not up, but into the room. It smells sharp and gritty, filling your nose with the taste of soot. You wave it away with your hand, eyes watering. For a moment, the warm refuge you built feels like it might betray you. This is what every pioneer feared most, a bad chimney. You crouch by the fire, watching how the smoke drifts. It refuses to rise cleanly. Instead, it twists and loops, rolling through the air like a stubborn spirit. The problem could be the wind outside, or maybe the clay chimney has cracked again overnight. The materials were never meant for perfection. According to early settler journals, most chimneys were built from stacked sticks plastered with mud, then baked hard by countless fires. Ingenious, fragile, and often dangerous. You grab a rag to cover your mouth and peer closer. Heat stings your cheeks, the air ripples, and you can hear the faint hiss of sap boiling inside the burning logs. Every instinct tells you to let it be, but you cannot risk suffocation in your sleep. You take a long stick, stir the fire, and open the door to let the draft pull smoke outward. A gust of cold air rushes in, biting your face, but the chimney finally exhales. The smoke shifts course, rising upward again in slow ribbons. Relief is a quiet thing. One curious diary entry from a young homesteader describes how he built a small hole in the roof above his fire because his chimney collapsed twice in 1 month. He called it a skylight to heaven, though his wife reportedly hated the constant snowflakes falling through it. Stories like that remind you that ingenuity often grew out of pure desperation. Academic circles remain divided on whether these early clay and stick chimneys were truly safe or merely tolerated hazards. Some experts point out that few original examples survive because they burned down alongside the homes that held them. Others insist that careful craftsmanship made them last years. You can imagine both outcomes. In this wilderness, A single spark could decide your fate. You sit back and study the walls above the fireplace. The wood there is darkened, streaked with black soot, as though scarred by memory. The scent lingers in everything: your clothes, your hair, your blankets. Smoke was not just part of cabin life, it was the air itself. It made your eyes sting, your throat ache, but it also kept insects away and cured the meat hanging from the rafters. The fire was both poison and protection. You reach for a small clay pot near the hearth. Inside are patches of dried clay and sand you mixed weeks ago, kept for repairs like this. You kneel again and start smoothing fresh clay around the cracks where the chimney meets the wall. Your fingers ache from the cold, but the clay sticks well, sealing the gaps. It feels like bandaging a wound, slow and necessary. Outside, the wind begins to rise, a long, moaning sound that seeps through the logs. The chimney answers with a deeper hum, a strange duet of air and fire. For a moment, the sound feels almost alive. You imagine it as the voice of the cabin itself, singing softly to remind you that everything here depends on balance. There is a peculiar tale told by travelers through the Appalachian valleys. They said that some families carved protective symbols into their chimneys, tiny crosses, circles, or handprints pressed into wet clay. The marks were meant to confuse spirits that slipped down through smoke. No one can prove the truth of that, but you find the image comforting, small gestures of hope against endless cold. You take a step back and inspect your work. The chimney leans slightly, crooked but sturdy. You smile despite yourself. It reminds you that frontier craftsmanship was never about beauty. It was about endurance. A man once wrote that his chimney stood like an old mule, ugly but loyal. You understand what he meant. By evening, the fire burns steady again, and the air has cleared. The flames rise high, casting trembling shadows along the walls. The sound is soothing now, a soft crackle that keeps loneliness at bay. You sit near the hearth, warming your hands, and feel an odd affection for this smoky old structure. It may cough and complain, but it keeps you alive. The smell of wood and ash fills the cabin, blending into something familiar and strangely sweet. You think about the hundreds of other chimneys across the frontier, each one glowing against the night, each one a heartbeat in the frozen dark. The idea makes you feel less alone. Later, when you lie down on your straw mattress, you can still hear the faint rumble of the fire. It sounds like the ocean from a great distance. The warmth reaches your toes, climbs slowly up your legs. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere deep in the chimney, the wind sighs again, and the house breathes with you. You wake to a softer cold this time, the kind that feels almost kind before the day begins to sharpen. The fire has died down to embers, glowing faintly in the half-light. You rise slowly, feeling the stiffness in your shoulders and knees, and add a handful of twigs to the ashes. They catch reluctantly, and soon a faint flame returns, trembling but alive. You crouch beside it, palms open, feeling the warmth crawl back into your fingers. The air smells of smoke and cooked wood, familiar and strangely tender. As the light grows stronger, the room reveals itself again. Walls darkened by soot, a floor dusted with ash, and the faint sparkle of frost that has crept in through the cracks you missed. You watch the light shift across the room, flickering between gold and grey. This fire is not just a tool anymore, it has become the center of your existence. Contemporary accounts make it clear that, for early pioneers, the hearth was more than heat, it was heart. Families gathered here to cook, to pray, to argue, to live. Births happened beside the fire, and so did deaths. In many cabins, it was the only true light source, the only warmth through endless dark months. You look at yours now, small but determined, and understand why settlers often spoke to their fires as if they were living things. A strange superstition drifted through the old settlements that the hearth flame mirrored the family's soul. If it burned clean and strong, the home would prosper. If it smoked or sputtered, bad luck lurked nearby. You glance at your fire, burning steadily now, and decide to take the omen as good. Specialists still debate whether hearth design in the frontier was more functional or symbolic. Some argue that the broad stone bases and towering mantels were attempts to imitate European style, while others believe the structure evolved from pure necessity, shaped by local materials and weather. Looking at your simple clay hearth, you suspect both ideas hold truth. Function came first, but beauty was not entirely forgotten. You rise and begin to prepare a small breakfast. A few leftover pieces of bread toasted on a flat rock near the flame. The smell is smoky and faintly sweet. Your stomach growls softly, a reminder that warmth alone cannot sustain you. You sip warm water from a tin cup, the heat sliding down your throat. Every simple action feels deliberate, slowed by the rhythm of the cold season. You glance at the walls and the shadows they cast. The fire paints everything in amber, softening the roughness of the logs, turning hardship into something almost poetic. It is easy to forget how deadly this world remains outside your door. Here, inside the glow, you can imagine peace. One curious account from a settler's wife describes how she arranged stones in the hearth to make patterns, believing the shapes brought luck to the household. She used smooth river pebbles and bits of glass from broken bottles, setting them in a spiral that caught the firelight. Perhaps art was another way of keeping despair away. You look down at your own hearth, crude and plain, and wonder what small beauty you might add someday. The day passes in quiet work. You mend a crack in the door frame, rearrange the stacked wood, and clean soot from the hearth with a bundle of damp moss. Each task feels both necessary and meditative. You begin to see why early settlers described cabin life as a kind of rhythm, slow, repetitive, and deeply grounding. By afternoon, the fire burns bright again, and the room grows comfortably warm. You stretch your legs before it, closing your eyes. The sound of wood splitting under heat is soft and irregular, like the ticking of an old clock. It marks time in a way no calendar could. Outside, the wind has died. The forest stands still, holding its breath. Through the small cracks near the roofline, faint beams of sunlight stream in, shimmering in the smoke. Dust and ash swirl together, turning the air into a living haze. You watch it dance, your heartbeat matching its slow motion. A curious thing about firelight is how it changes the way you see. In this flicker, every scar on your hands looks heroic, every flaw in the walls like the line of a story. Perhaps this is why pioneers called their hearths the heart of memory. Here, light rewrites the hardships into something worth remembering. As evening descends, you add the larger logs, the ones you saved from yesterday's chopping. They burn deep and long, casting steady heat through the cabin. You set your stool close and pull the blanket over your knees. Outside, snow falls again, but you do not hear it anymore. The world ends at the walls of your cabin, and within this circle of light, everything feels timeless. You think of all the others who once sat like this, in other winters, staring into other fires. The frontier was vast, yet every flame was a mirror of another. There is comfort in that idea, the quiet knowledge that your small fire joins an invisible constellation of survival. The flames settle lower now, turning from gold to red. You whisper softly to the fire, not from superstition but gratitude. It has kept your hands moving, your spirit steady. You imagine the warmth spreading through the walls, into the logs, into the earth beneath your feet. The hearth breathes quietly with you, both of you alive, holding on together. The smell of smoke lingers long after the fire has died down. It seeps into everything you own, your clothes, your hair, your bedding. You cannot escape it, but you stop wanting to. The scent becomes part of life itself, a signature of existence in this wilderness. You stir the embers again, coaxing them into a faint glow. Thin trails of grey smoke rise lazily, curling upward like quiet prayers. Surviving evidence indicates that early settlers often lived half their lives inside smoky rooms. The fireplaces drew unevenly, and many chimneys leaked, leaving a constant haze in the air. Smoke irritated the eyes and lungs, but in its own way, it served a purpose. It preserved the timber, kept away insects, and even slowed the decay of meat hung from the rafters. To the pioneers, the smell of smoke was not a nuisance, but a companion. You lean closer to the fire and let the haze brush against your skin. It smells sharp and earthy, familiar in a way that feels ancestral. Somewhere deep inside, it reminds you of every human story that began beside a flame. You feel connected to them all, the nameless families who once huddled around flickering light, whispering stories into the dark. One peculiar practice appears in the journals of several mountain families. They believed that smoke could carry away illness. When a child was sick, parents waved the child's blanket through the smoke and hung it outside until morning. Some swore it worked. Perhaps it was the heat killing germs, or perhaps it was the hope itself that healed. You think of this as you lift a piece of wool closer to the rising grey, watching the way it dances before disappearing into the air. Experts can't quite settle the question of whether smoke improved cabin insulation. Some claim that a thin film of soot actually helped seal gaps in the walls, darkening the interior but trapping heat. Others dismiss it as folklore. You can imagine the argument lasting another 100 years, but tonight you believe the old ways. You can feel the warmth holding longer, the air thicker and still. You stand, stretch, and open the cabin door. A puff of fresh air rushes in, cold and clear, and the smoke swirls outward. The world outside is silver with frost, the trees bowing beneath its weight. The wind carries away your breath, but also the haze. You stand for a moment, watching it drift upward into the sky, a pale ribbon fading into nothing. Then you close the door and return to the quiet inside. Your walls now smell like the forest after lightning, rich with sap and char. You can almost taste the air, a mixture of ash and pine. It coats your throat, but it also comforts you. In the flicker of firelight, the haze softens every edge, turning the rough cabin into something gentle, almost dreamlike. There is an odd story told among early traders who traveled the Allegheny valleys. They spoke of cabins so thick with smoke that the rafters dripped tar, yet the families inside lived to old age, while others in cleaner air perished. Whether coincidence or proof, no one knew. Still, many settlers began to believe that smoke itself was a kind of guardian, the spirit of fire watching over the living. You move your stool closer to the fire, holding your palms out. The warmth glows against your skin. The smoke weaves faint patterns around you, and you follow them with your eyes until they vanish into the chimney. It feels hypnotic, a slow dance of grey and gold. You find yourself breathing slower, calmer. The cabin hums quietly, as though the air itself has thickened into comfort. When you look at the ceiling, you notice how the smoke has painted it. The logs are darkened, streaked in uneven shades of black and brown. Some settlers called this the sky of the house, and for good reason. It told the story of every fire ever lit inside. You run your hand along one of the beams and feel the smoothness where the smoke has polished it over time. You remember reading about how some indigenous tribes used controlled smoke inside their lodges intentionally, not only for heat and preservation but also for ceremony. They saw smoke as a bridge between worlds, a link between body and spirit. Perhaps the settlers borrowed more from them than they realized. The fire snaps sharply, breaking your reverie. Sparks fly upward, chased by the smoke, glowing briefly before fading. You smile. Even the smallest embers seem alive, carrying whispers of summer sunlight locked inside the wood. You toss another piece of pine into the hearth, and the air fills again with that resinous sweetness. You sit quietly and listen. The wind outside presses softly against the walls, and the chimney hums its low tune. Inside, everything feels suspended, as if the smoke itself has slowed time. You take a deep breath, letting the scent fill you, then exhale slowly. The air may be thick, but it feels safe. Some settlers wrote that when the smoke grew too heavy, they would crawl onto the floor to breathe the cooler, clearer air near the ground. You imagine it, whole families lying on their stomachs, talking in whispers, laughing through coughs. Survival did not always look dignified, but it worked. The fire burns lower now, You stretch out your legs and pull the blanket closer, eyes half closed. The haze around the ceiling swirls lazily, turning the light soft as candle wax. You can almost see faces forming in it if you stare long enough, shapes of the past, maybe, or just the tricks of fatigue. You do not mind. It feels like company. As you drift towards sleep, the last curl of smoke rises from the coals and disappears into the darkness above. The air tastes of ash and warmth, and in that faint bitterness, you find peace. The fire has burned down to glowing embers, and the cabin feels hushed, like it is holding its breath. You stretch under your blanket, trying to ignore the chill that clings to the corners of the room. The wind outside hums softly, and the roof groans as snow shifts on top. You pull the covers tighter, feeling the rough texture of woven wool against your cheek. The air smells faintly of tallow and wood smoke. You are wrapped in warmth, but it is fragile, always fleeting. According to frontier diaries, one of the most constant struggles of early settlers was keeping their bodies warm through the night. The cabins might have held heat for a few hours, but once the fire faded, the temperature dropped quickly. Families experimented endlessly with bedding, layering animal hides, woven blankets, and straw-filled ticks. What they discovered was that comfort came not from softness, but from trapping air. Air, even when cold, could hold heat if you layered it right. You reach for your blanket and feel its heavy weight. It smells faintly of smoke and pine needles, the scent of the forest outside now woven into the fabric. Beneath it is a layer of deer skin, smooth on one side and soft with fur on the other. The settlers prized these hides, not only for warmth but for the connection they offered to the land. Every animal harvested was part of a cycle of survival, and its hide became both shield and memory. There is an old tale from a trapper's journal that speaks of a man who swore by sleeping completely naked between two layers of furs, claiming the heat from his skin would be trapped more efficiently that way. His neighbors thought him eccentric, but he lived through every winter. Whether it was science or stubbornness, no one could say. You think about that as you tuck the blanket under your chin and feel the heat of your body gathering beneath the layers. Some researchers argue that the pioneers' bedding habits tell us more about their ingenuity than their poverty. They adapted to what they had: scraps of linen, old coats, even dried grass stuffed into pillowcases. A few settlers used cattail fluff, soft and silvery, gathered from frozen marshes. It was not elegant, but it worked. You adjust your position and feel the straw mattress beneath you creak. The sound is rough and familiar. It releases the faint smell of earth and summer fields, a reminder that warmth is built from every season that came before. You close your eyes and listen to the fire's last whispers, faint and steady. In some households, a single quilt was considered a family heirloom. Women stitched them through long winters, recycling worn clothes and leftover scraps. One surviving quilt from 1790 is said to contain pieces of a soldier's uniform, wedding linen, and the hem of a child's christening gown. The pattern forms a chaotic mosaic of life itself, sewn together in patience and hope. You imagine that same kind of patchwork on your own bed, the weight of it pressing you gently into sleep. A curious superstition lingered in certain settlements that you should never fold a quilt before dawn, as it might trap your soul within the fabric. You smile at the thought, pulling your own cover a little higher. There is something poetic in the idea that warmth could keep more than just your body safe. You roll onto your side and feel the warmth of your breath against the blanket. The rhythm of it becomes a soft lullaby. The rough weave scratches slightly against your nose, but you do not mind. Everything here carries texture, a reminder that comfort was never smooth in this world. Experts still discuss how pioneers managed moisture inside their cabins. Too much insulation could trap humidity, soaking bedding and walls alike. Some families left tiny vents or even cracked doors to let air move, accepting the draft as the price of dryness. The balance between heat and dampness was delicate, like walking a tightrope. You can feel it tonight as the air shifts between too warm and too cold, never quite perfect. The flicker of the dying fire casts faint shadows on the walls. The light catches the edge of your blanket, turning its coarse fibers into threads of gold. You trace one with your finger, following the weave, thinking of the hands that made it. Perhaps it once belonged to another settler, someone who fought the same battle against the cold, someone whose story ended where yours begins. Outside, the wind rises again, brushing against the walls like the sigh of a restless spirit. The cabin creaks, but it holds. You curl tighter, drawing your knees up beneath the covers. The layers trap your body heat until you begin to feel drowsy. You can almost imagine the world outside disappearing. The snow, the wolves, the cold, all erased by the small island of warmth you built for yourself. There is a comfort in the weight of blankets. It quiets the body, slows the mind, makes the darkness less lonely. You can feel your heartbeat steadying, your breathing evening out. The last spark in the hearth fades to red. You listen to the soft rustle of fabric, the muted whisper of wind against wood. It is enough. Before sleep takes you completely, you think about how fragile warmth truly is. It cannot be stored, only made again and again, night after night. The pioneers must have known this truth better than anyone. Every fire, every blanket, every breath of shared heat was a reminder that nothing in this world stays safe for long, but for tonight, it is enough. The morning light sneaks into the cabin in pale streaks, soft and uncertain. You open your eyes slowly, still wrapped in the heavy warmth of blankets and skins. The air feels thick with last night's smoke, and for a few precious seconds, you forget where you are. Then the stiffness in your back reminds you. You are lying on straw, not feathers, and the soft creaks around you are the sounds of the log walls settling with the cold. You stretch carefully, listening to the quiet world wake up. According to journals kept by frontier families, beds in early cabins were more invention than furniture. Few settlers brought proper bed frames across the mountains. Most built their own, hammering together planks of rough pine or elm, sometimes just suspending ropes or rawhide strips between posts. A sack filled with straw or corn husks was laid on top, and a quilt or fur thrown over that. It was crude, but it worked, and after a day of chopping wood and hauling water, it felt close enough to paradise. You sit up and look down at your own bed, a simple frame of uneven timber. The straw tick underneath you has flattened in the middle, forming a shallow hollow shaped by your body. You run your hand across the surface and feel bits of dried grass poking through the fabric. It smells faintly sweet, like last summer's meadow. The scent is a quiet kind of comfort. One bizarre frontier superstition insisted that stuffing the mattress with straw from a field struck by lightning would protect sleepers from illness. Whether anyone truly believed it or not, stories like that passed from family to family, whispered as the nights grew longer. You smile at the thought, imagining someone trudging into a storm just to collect magic straw. Perhaps desperation breeds creativity more easily than reason. Researchers continue to disagree about how comfortable those makeshift beds truly were. Some argue that the constant shifting and scratching of straw led to sleepless nights. Others claim that the natural insulation of hay and animal hides kept people alive through sub-zero temperatures. Either way, the bed was never just a place for rest. It was a fragile fortress against the winter that pressed in from every side. You rise slowly and shake out the blanket. It releases a faint puff of dust into the air, catching the light in tiny golden specks. The deerskin beneath it still holds traces of warmth from your body. You think about how strange it is that the comfort of your bed depends on so many small, imperfect things: straw, hide, fabric, smoke, all working together in quiet harmony. Frontier families often shared their beds, not just for affection but for survival. In one letter from 1792, a woman described how 6 people, parents and children together, slept side by side beneath 2 quilts. "We shared the same heat," she wrote, "and in that closeness was our hope." You picture it vividly: the tangle of limbs, the soft whisper of breath, the rhythm of hearts beating together in the dark. A curious custom appears in some old settlements where children were placed in straw cradles near the hearth while adults slept farther away. The idea was to keep the youngest closest to warmth, even if that meant breathing smoke all night. It worked, but only just. Some diaries mention the constant worry of sparks landing on blankets or straw. Safety was a luxury few could afford. You fluff the straw beneath you, trying to restore a little spring. The sound of rustling fills the small room, soft and rhythmic. It feels like the whisper of summer caught in the cold. You think of the people who harvested this straw months ago, swinging scythes under a hot sun, never knowing their labor would keep someone alive in midwinter. There is poetry in that unseen connection. The cabin air is cool again, your breath visible as faint white wisps. You reach for your boots and set them near the fire to warm before putting them on. The coals from last night are still faintly alive, glowing softly under a layer of ash. You stir them with a stick and add a small log, watching the flame crawl back to life. The smell of burning pine spreads gently through the room. Some settlers joked that their beds were warm coffins, snug but confining. The phrase makes you laugh quietly, though you understand the sentiment. Once tucked in beneath layers of hide and wool, movement was nearly impossible. The comfort was heavy, almost suffocating, but necessary. You could not risk letting the warmth escape. You sit again at the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of fatigue still lingering in your muscles. Outside, a faint sunlight glimmers through the frost on the window slits. The world feels distant, muffled, waiting. You sip a bit of water from the tin cup beside you. It is cold but refreshing. A story recorded by a traveller mentions that in some regions, settlers lined their bed frames with hot stones wrapped in cloth before sleeping. The stones, heated by the hearth, radiated gentle warmth for hours. It was an idea borrowed from older European traditions, passed down by memory rather than books. You glance at the stones near your own hearth and wonder whether you might try the same tonight. The fire grows stronger, light dancing along the wooden floor. You spread your blanket across the bed once more, smoothing it carefully, almost reverently. Each fold feels like a small ritual, a quiet promise that you will rest here again tonight, alive and warm. You stand by the fire for a while, letting your body wake fully. The day will bring work, always more work, wood to cut, water to haul, food to find. But for now, the bed behind you glows faintly in the morning light, its rough shape softened by warmth and memory. The cabin hums with small sounds, the crack of fire, the sigh of wind outside, the faint rustle of straw as it settles back into stillness. You breathe it all in, the scent of smoke, pine and sleep, and for a fleeting moment you feel rich. The sound of wind against the logs is steady tonight, a low rhythm like the breath of some sleeping creature. You pull the blanket up to your chin and listen. The fire crackles softly, throwing its orange glow across the room. The air between you and the door is thick and still, but every time the wind presses hard enough, you feel a faint whisper of cold slide through a crack somewhere. It crawls up your spine, quick as a cat. Most frontier families learned early that surviving the cold was rarely a solitary task. You could cut the thickest logs, seal the gaps, and still freeze if you faced the winter alone. Surviving evidence from the period shows that settlers often shared every bit of heat they could, both human and animal. Families slept close, sometimes with their livestock nearby. You look at your small room now, thinking how empty it feels compared to the crowded nights those people endured. You shift your blanket aside and throw another piece of wood into the fire. Sparks leap upward, painting your face in quick bursts of light. The smell of sap fills the air again, sharp and sweet. You settle back, letting the warmth sink into your bones. You imagine other cabins scattered across the hills, each with its own small circle of light, each person fighting the same invisible battle against the cold. There's an odd bit of folklore claiming that if you shared your bed with another person through the winter, your spirits would align and dream the same dreams. A strange comfort, perhaps, but one that speaks to the closeness that life demanded. There was no privacy then. only shared warmth, shared breath, and the unspoken bond of survival. Experts remain divided on how effective this closeness really was in preventing illness. Some argue that shared sleeping arrangements kept temperatures higher and spirits steadier. Others note that the same conditions spread colds and fevers quickly. Either way, isolation was not an option. The cold itself was a kind of hunter, and it always sought the lone. You imagine what it must have felt like. 6 or 7 people huddled together under layered quilts, boots still on, hands clasped, the room filled with the sound of breathing. The fire would have burned low, shadows flickering over faces half hidden in sleep. Sometimes the children slept so close to the hearth that they woke dusted with ash. Yet in that rough closeness, they found safety. One curious account from an 1811 diary tells of a woman who let her cow and 2 goats sleep inside the cabin during a blizzard. The heat from their bodies, she wrote, kept the frost from creeping too far into our bones. It must have smelled terrible, but she and her children survived when others did not. Necessity had its own kind of logic on the frontier. You shift again under your blanket, your mind tracing the shape of that story. You can almost hear the low breaths of animals, the gentle rustle of straw, the firelight reflecting off their eyes. The boundaries between human and beast blurred in the struggle for warmth. It was not dignity that kept people alive out here. It was adaptation. Your cabin creaks again, a familiar sound now. You glance at the door and imagine the darkness outside, the endless trees, the weight of snow, the silence. You are grateful for the heat, for the light, for the faint hum of the fire that keeps the world from feeling too large. Some settlers said that the quietest nights were the most dangerous, that silence meant the temperature had dropped below what even wolves could tolerate. On those nights, families clung tighter, whispering softly to stay awake, rubbing their hands and feet to keep the blood moving. You think about that as you pull your blanket higher and tuck it under your chin. The warmth of your breath gathers beneath the covers, forming a tiny pocket of summer. The smell of the fire drifts through the room again. You take in a slow breath, feeling the sting of smoke in your nose. It's familiar now, like an old friend who never quite leaves. You glance toward the small clay pot near the fire, where fat from last night's cooking still lingers. You'll melt it later. Maybe use it to polish your boots or waterproof the door frame. Nothing is wasted here. Every bit of warmth, every scrap of resource, is part of a circle that must be tended. A letter from a settler named Nathaniel Cox speaks of how silence became unbearable in the dead of winter. He wrote that people talked to the fire, to the wind, even to the walls, just to hear something alive answer back. You can understand that now. The cabin listens too, its timbers creaking like an old companion, responding in its slow, wooden language. You shift closer to the fire again, wrapping the blanket around your shoulders. The warmth builds slowly, wrapping your body in layers of drowsy comfort. The flames twist and bow, each spark a heartbeat. Outside, the wind sighs again, softer now, almost tender. You close your eyes and imagine a world without the cold, a summer field stretching forever. Then you smile faintly, realizing that even in that dream, there would be something missing. The fight itself gives meaning to the warmth. To endure is to understand what it costs to live. You lie back, the fire's reflection dancing against your eyelids. The walls breathe with you, and the faint hum of wind becomes your lullaby. You drift towards sleep, feeling both small and infinite in the same breath, the way only winter can make you feel. Morning comes without warning. You wake not to light, but to the sound of wind slipping through unseen cracks, whispering across the cabin walls like a question. The air bites your skin before you even sit up. You pull the blanket tighter and stare at the tiny slivers of daylight sneaking through the wooden seams. They shine on the floor like pale threads of silver. The fire has died, leaving behind only grey ash. Most settlers learned quickly that log walls alone would not keep out the cold. According to surviving homestead notes, It was common practice to stuff rags, paper, and even old corn husks into every gap they could find. The smallest slit could undo a night's worth of warmth. You reach for your sack of scraps and start your morning ritual, crouched low, fingers already numb. The cabin smells faintly of old cloth, pine pitch, and damp ash. You press bits of worn linen into the seams where two logs meet. The material darkens slightly as it absorbs the moisture from your fingertips. It is tedious work, but each little patch makes a difference. As you fill the cracks, the light fades from between them, and the air grows stiller. You can feel the balance shifting, warmth beginning to hold its ground again. A curious belief from old mountain communities said that using paper with written words added luck to the home. Families stuffed scraps of letters or hymn pages into the gaps, convinced that scripture could keep the wind from finding its way back inside. You think about that as you press in a bit of parchment from an old pamphlet. Maybe faith can fill a hole just as well as cloth. Some researchers suggest that the ritual of sealing walls was more than practicality. It gave settlers a sense of control over a world that otherwise refused to listen. The act of repairing, of choosing what stayed in and what stayed out, was a declaration that the wilderness had boundaries. You feel that same quiet satisfaction now. Each crack you close like a promise that the cold will not win today. You pause to stretch, your back popping as you straighten. The window, such as it is little more than a square hole covered with oiled paper. Frost has crept across it overnight, tracing delicate branches of ice. You touch the surface gently, and your finger leaves a small, clear trail. The paper shivers under your hand. It lets in a faint glow but no warmth. Early settlers prized real glass-like treasure, yet most never saw a pane until years after building their homes. An old letter found in a Tennessee cabin describes a family who lined their single window with sheets of animal bladder, stretched thin and translucent. It let in light but trapped the air. Primitive, yet surprisingly effective. You can almost imagine how strange it must have looked, a ghostly sheet glimmering with candlelight at night. The wind rises again, this time sharper. It tests your work immediately, rattling the seams. You hold your breath, waiting to feel the telltale draft against your skin, but none comes. A smile spreads across your face. The satisfaction is simple and pure. The cabin may be rough, but it listens to your hands. You continue along the back wall, pressing bits of old fabric into new gaps. Some are from torn shirts, others from worn socks, still smelling faintly of tallow soap. It is an odd collage, a patchwork of memory embedded into the very walls. If someone were to tear this cabin apart one day, they would find pieces of your life hidden inside. One traveler's account mentions a family that used the pages of a broken Bible to insulate their walls, and for years afterward, visitors swore that in deep winter, you could still make out the faint outline of words when sunlight struck the paper just right. You think of that now as you glance at the soft glow seeping through the gaps. Maybe your cabin will one day whisper your story too. The wind outside begins to calm. The air inside feels heavier, thicker. You crouch near the floor, holding your palm near the wall to test for leaks. The faint chill that once crept through is gone. Instead, you feel only the quiet weight of still air, like a hell breath. Experts have noted that the settlers' fight against drafts created a paradox. Too much sealing could lead to suffocating conditions. Too little could mean freezing. The balance was delicate, learned through trial and error. You think of this as you sit back on your heels, watching a faint wisp of smoke curl from the dying coals in the hearth. Life here is a constant negotiation, never won completely. You rise, stretch again, and wipe your hands on your trousers. The scraps are gone, the walls patched, the job done. You stand quietly for a moment, letting the silence return. The room feels different now, closer, softer, safer. Even the wind's distant moan has changed its tone, muffled to a lullaby. You add a log to the fire and watch the smoke rise straight this time, no longer swirling toward the gaps. You smile and sit beside the hearth, rubbing your hands together. Warmth creeps back into your fingers, slow but certain. The faint crackle of flame becomes the only sound. Outside, snow begins to fall again, tapping gently on the roof. Inside, you sit in your dim-sealed sanctuary, surrounded by rags and patched seams, and realize something profound in the quiet. Every scrap, every smudge of dirt, every imperfection is part of your defense against the vast, merciless world beyond. You close your eyes and listen. The wind still calls faintly from the trees, but it cannot reach you now. The cabin is whole, stitched together by your hands, your patience, and a stubborn faith that warmth belongs here. The sound wakes you first. A deep, heavy crack, like the world itself splitting open. Then silence. The cabin holds its breath. You lie perfectly still, your heart thudding in your chest, waiting for another sound. When it comes, it is softer, a groan that rises through the walls, a slow shudder of wood and ice shifting against each other. The cold has grown stronger in the night. You can feel it before you move, a weight pressing against the walls, squeezing into every seam you sealed yesterday. You push yourself up and see your breath plume in front of you, thick and white. The fire has gone out again, nothing but grey ash in the hearth. You hurry to strike a spark, the flint slipping in your cold fingers. It takes 3 tries before the tinder catches. The tiny flame flickers, then grows, throwing a weak glow against the log walls. The warmth is barely noticeable, but it is a start. Letters from the northern frontier often mention how the sound of freezing could be louder than any storm. Water inside logs expanded until it burst, sending cracks like rifle fire through the still night. Sometimes it was the cabin itself that broke, timbers splitting with sharp, echoing pops. The settlers learned to live with that constant fear, never sure which noise meant danger and which was harmless. You wrap a blanket around your shoulders and listen. Outside, the wind has died, but the forest is alive with strange noises. You can hear the creak of trees bending under the weight of ice, the distant crash of a frozen limb giving way. Each sound feels both close and infinite. You wonder how many cabins have fallen tonight, how many fires have failed. One odd story from a family in Vermont tells of a winter so cold that their buckets froze solid inside the house, and the cider turned to slush beside the fire. They joked about eating spoons of it with supper, but by spring, their laughter was gone. You think about that as you sip from your own cup, the water stiff with ice along its edges. The taste is sharp and metallic, almost painful. Experts have written that early settlers sometimes built their cabins with green wood, too fresh and wet to withstand deep frost. When the temperature dropped suddenly, the moisture inside those logs expanded, warping walls and breaking corners. You look at your own cabin and wonder if the deep groan you heard was one of those cracks starting to form. The thought sends a small shiver down your spine that has nothing to do with cold. You stand and inspect the walls, tracing your fingers along the seams. The surface is cold, hard as stone. Frost clings in tiny white veins between the logs, glimmering faintly in the light of the fire. You press your palm flat and feel the vibration of the world outside, faint but alive. The cabin feels like a living thing under pressure, holding itself together by sheer will. There is a peculiar belief recorded in one mountain settlement that the cold itself had a spirit, an ancient presence that could hear every sound a house made. People were told not to curse when the wood cracked, for the spirit might take offense and send worse weather. You half smile at the thought, whispering a quiet apology to the frozen air, just in case. The fire grows stronger now, light pushing back the shadows. You hold your hands out to it, the heat stinging your palms at first, then seeping deeper until the ache eases. You can smell resin and ash, hear the faint hiss of melting ice along the chimney. The sound is reassuring. It means something is softening, even if only by inches. You sit down and pull the blanket tighter around you. The walls groan again, lower this time, a tired, heavy sigh. The sound is less frightening now that the fire is alive. It reminds you that survival is a conversation between you and the world outside. Every pop, every creak, every whisper of wind is the land speaking back. A traveler once wrote that during the worst freezes, even voices sounded brittle. He claimed that words left the mouth like shards of glass, breaking in the air before reaching another ear. Whether that was poetic exaggeration or memory shaped by fear, you cannot tell, but you understand the feeling. Every movement, every breath feels fragile in cold like this. You shift closer to the fire again. The warmth radiates across your knees, the orange light painting the room with gentle motion. You can hear water dripping now, slow and rhythmic, from the thawing roof beams. Each drop hits the floor with a tiny sound like a clock ticking. You find comfort in its steadiness. It means time is still moving, that winter, however cruel, has not stopped the world entirely. The cold presses harder against the windows. Frost blooms again across the oiled paper, forming intricate flowers of ice. You trace one pattern with your fingertip, the chill biting your skin. The design changes as you touch it, melting slightly, reforming seconds later. You think about the pioneers who woke to the same sight centuries ago, staring at frost that looked almost too beautiful to belong to hardship. You lean back, eyes half closed. The fire has taken hold fully now, filling the cabin with a faint hum of warmth. The walls continue their quiet creaking, the ice shifting outside, the wind gathering again in the trees. Everything sounds alive in its own frozen way. Before long, you will have to fetch more wood, patch the cracks again, and tend the fire through another night. But for this moment, sitting in the glow of flame and listening to the ice sing against the world, you feel strangely peaceful. The cold may surround you, but it has not yet claimed you. You are still here, breathing, listening, alive in the heart of winter's voice. The fire has been burning since dawn, steady and calm, but its scent has changed. The air inside the cabin now carries the heavy sweetness of melted fat mixed with wood smoke. You know that smell well. It means you have begun your daily experiment with tallow and candles, trying once again to make light and warmth from the same humble ingredient. According to surviving household records, most pioneer families made their own candles every few weeks. Beeswax was a luxury few could afford, so animal fat, or tallow, became the source of both light and heat. The process was messy, slow, and surprisingly dangerous. You glance at your own tin pot bubbling near the fire, the melted fat shimmering like liquid gold. The faint hiss reminds you how easily a single mistake could turn flame into disaster. You pour a bit of the mixture into a small clay mold, the smell rising in thick waves. It fills the cabin with a scent halfway between soup and smoke. You smile faintly, knowing that this is how every home must have smelled in winter. There was no escaping it. Some settlers joked that they could tell what their neighbors were cooking simply by the color of their candles. A peculiar note in an old trader's diary tells of one man who added crushed herbs and pine resin to his tallow for pleasantness and longer burn. The neighbors teased him for wasting good materials, yet his cabin was known to smell faintly of wild mint, even in the deepest winter. You find the idea oddly charming, and wonder what small luxuries you might add next time. Researchers often point out that early candles served a dual purpose. They were not only for light but also for warmth. In a small space like this, even a handful of candles could raise the temperature slightly. The heat they produced was minor, but at night, every degree mattered. You can feel it now as you light the first one, its thin flame adding a soft glow beside the fire. The cabin transforms instantly. Shadows pull back, walls gleam faintly, and the air feels thicker, more alive. You dip another wick, steadying your hand against the table. The melted tallow clings to your fingers, oily and smooth. Once cooled, these candles will burn fast, dripping freely, leaving trails of hardened wax across every surface. Yet that waste was part of the charm. The settlers saw it not as mess but as proof of light's generosity. One strange superstition found in frontier journals says that if a candle flickered wildly, It meant someone far away was thinking of you. If the flame burned blue, a storm was on its way. You glance at yours now, steady and golden, and take it as a quiet sign of peace. The fire pops behind you, sending a spark upward. You turn, checking the pot, then stir what remains. The fat thickens as it cools, turning from clear to cloudy. You can see your reflection in its surface, faint and distorted. The smell has mellowed, still heavy but no longer unpleasant. It smells like safety, like work completed and light earned. Some scholars still discuss how much of a role these small rituals played in keeping settlers sane through the endless dark. The routine of melting, dipping, pouring, trimming, it was as much meditation as necessity. You feel that now, the way your body relaxes into rhythm, your mind quieting as you focus only on the task at hand. You set the new candles on the table to cool. Their pale shapes look fragile, ghostly. In a few hours you will light them and watch them lean and sigh in the warm air. The idea fills you with quiet anticipation. Light, even small and smoky, feels like a promise fulfilled. Outside, you can hear the faint rattle of sleet against the roof. The sound mixes with the slow dripping of tallow into the molds, creating a strange harmony. You look toward the single window and see the sky dimming again, clouds pressing low and heavy. The storm is returning, patient and hungry. You add more wood to the fire, feeding it before it fades. A curious story told by a preacher in the early 1800s claimed that settlers sometimes used leftover candle stubs as emergency heaters. They placed several inside a small clay pot, lit them together, and covered the top with a plate to trap the heat. Crude, yet effective enough to keep fingers from freezing. You look at your own half-burned candles and consider trying the same before nightfall. The cabin glows now, with the gentle rhythm of fire and candlelight. The two flames dance together, one bold and roaring, the other calm and constant. The smell of tallow thickens the air, but it carries a strange sweetness. You find yourself humming softly, a tune you do not remember learning. It fits the flicker of light, the hush of snow outside, the heartbeat of warmth inside. By the time you finish cleaning the pot, the candles have hardened completely. You trim each wick and arrange them neatly in a small wooden box. Their pale surfaces catch the last of the sunlight as it slips through the window. You pause to look at them, rows of tiny victories. In a world so cold, something this simple feels like abundance. As evening falls, you light one of the new candles. The flame rises slowly, steady and sure. You place it beside the bed, its glow washing across the rough walls. You can smell the faint trace of fat and firewood mingling in the air. You sit quietly, letting the warmth touch your skin, and realize that in the long language of survival, even a flicker of light counts as triumph. By morning, the world outside your cabin has vanished under snow. The drifts reach the window ledge, smooth and white, muffling every sound. You open the door carefully, pushing against the weight of it, and a wave of cold air rushes in, sharp enough to sting your eyes. The snow outside glows with a pale blue light, untouched and endless. For a moment, you stand there in silence, the chill biting your cheeks, and then you notice something strange. It is warmer inside now than it was yesterday. According to early frontier journals, pioneers learned to appreciate snow in a way that seems almost impossible today. They discovered that when drifts built up around the walls, it did not simply trap them, it insulated them. The frozen piles sealed every gap the wind might find, turning the cabin into a hibernating creature, breathing slow and warm inside its cocoon of ice. You close the door again and run your hand along the inner wall. It feels cold to the touch, but there is a stillness in the air, a thick calm that was not there before. One curious note from a settler's diary describes how some families deliberately piled snow higher against their homes before storms. They called it banking, a crude but clever method that used nature's cruelty as protection. The snow became both enemy and ally, You think about that now, about how the same thing that could bury a man alive might also keep him breathing. Experts today still argue over just how effective snow insulation really was. Some suggest it trapped humidity and caused rot, while others claim it could raise indoor temperatures by several degrees. You do not need science to tell you it helps. The proof is in the air you breathe, still, heavy, quiet. You kneel by the fire and feed it fresh wood. The flames leap quickly, eager for fuel. The light glows soft and golden against the walls, reflecting in small beads of water forming where the snow meets the logs outside. You can hear faint drips, slow and steady, as if the cabin itself is melting just enough to remind you that warmth is winning, even if only for now. A strange story passed among trappers who lived deep in the northern woods. They claimed that on the coldest nights, when the snow buried their shelters completely, they could hear the frost talking soft murmurs, sighs, and distant tapping that sounded almost like whispers. Some said it was the sound of spirits trapped in the snow. Others said it was just ice expanding. You listen for it now, half hoping to hear those ghostly voices. You pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders and sit near the hearth. The light of the fire flickers over the oiled paper window, turning the snow beyond it into a soft, glowing wall. You realize how strange it is that this frozen barrier feels comforting now. It keeps the wind at bay, wraps you in silence, and turns your small cabin into something like a womb. There is a kind of peace in this stillness. The world outside has disappeared, and with it, all the noise of effort. You can no longer chop wood, fetch water, or wander far. The snow has forced you to stop. For the first time in weeks, there is no task waiting, only time. You breathe slowly, watching your breath fade into the warm haze above the fire. One traveler's account from 1805 describes the way snow could change sound itself. He wrote that when it fell thick enough, even a shout vanished before it reached another ear. You test the thought by clapping your hands once. The sound is swallowed immediately, soft and hollow. The silence that follows is so deep it feels alive. You think of the animals outside, foxes burrowed beneath drifts, deer hidden in the trees, maybe even a bear curled in its den, dreaming through the season. Nature has its own version of patience, its own kind of prayer. You feel a part of it now, small and quiet, just another creature waiting for the thaw. You stand and move toward the door again, pressing your ear to the wood. There is no wind, no cracking branches, no distant howl, only the faint, slow movement of the snow settling against the roof. The weight of it is immense, yet strangely comforting. You can almost imagine the whole world pausing under that same blanket. In some parts of the northern frontier, settlers turned the snow itself into building material, shaping it into temporary walls or trenches around their cabins to keep the wind away. One letter from a Canadian homestead mentions children carving tunnels through deep drifts and lighting candles inside them, transforming danger into play. You picture that now, small flickers of light glowing through blue-white snow, laughter muffled by the weight of winter. You step back from the door and return to the fire. The smell of burning pine has become your favorite perfume, heavy but kind. The air feels warmer now, wrapping around you like a slow exhale. The snow may have buried your home from sight, but inside, you have built a small world of light and sound, a universe of your own making. As evening comes, you light one of yesterday's tallow candles and place it on the windowsill. Its soft glow seeps into the white wall outside, spreading faintly through the snow like sunrise trapped in ice. You stare at it for a long time, mesmerized by how gentle it looks. The candle burns quietly, steady and golden, and you imagine it will keep burning even after you sleep, marking your place in this silent sea of winter. You lie down again, the air warm enough now that you can breathe without seeing frost. The walls creak softly, the snow shifts, and the fire hums its low tune beside you. You close your eyes and smile. The storm outside may be endless, but you have learned something precious tonight. Even the coldest thing on earth can choose to shelter you if you learn how to listen. When morning arrives, the light feels strange, soft and watery, as if the world has been filtered through frost. You wake slowly, your muscles stiff from sleep, and the first thing you hear is the faint clink of metal. Your tools are cold. The axe, the auger, the saw, all of them have frozen to the ground where you left them by the door. You sigh and rub your hands together, already bracing for the sting of cold steel. Every pioneer's survival depended on tools. They were lifelines, extensions of human will forged into iron. According to letters from blacksmiths in the early colonies, an axe head or a handsaw could be worth more than a cow in trade. Out here, there was no store to replace what you broke. You learned to care for every blade like a friend. You pick up your axe now, the wooden handle slick with frost, and feel the weight of that responsibility in your hands. A curious detail from frontier folklore says that tools should never be left hungry. That meant keeping the metal coated with oil or tallow, as if feeding them so they would not betray you. It sounds silly, but as you wipe the blade with a rag dipped in fat, you understand the logic. In this cold, metal cracks easily, and once it shatters, it is useless. Respect keeps you alive as much as skill. Specialists still debate whether settlers brought European tool designs unchanged or adapted them to the new wilderness. Some argue that frontier blacksmiths invented smaller, lighter axes to suit the dense North American woods, while others claim the tools were simply reused from older farms back east. Looking at your axe now, you can see that it carries stories from both worlds, old knowledge repurposed for a new battle. You step outside, boots crunching through crusted snow, and set the axe against a log. The air bites the inside of your nose with every breath. You swing carefully, testing the weight. The sound of iron striking wood is crisp and hollow, echoing through the frozen trees. Chips fly, catching the sunlight as they fall. The smell of fresh pine sap bursts into the air, sharp and clean. It is almost intoxicating, that scent of life hidden inside the cold. You work slowly, finding rhythm in the repetition. The wood resists at first, but soon the blade sinks deeper. Each swing brings heat back to your body, your breath forming clouds that rise and fade. The sound of chopping is steady, like a drum beat. You realize how comforting it is, this simple, ancient work. In one old diary, a homesteader wrote that he could tell a man's character by the way he used an axe. A careless swing meant impatience. A smooth rhythm meant endurance. You wonder what your strokes say about you. You pause to study the log, then strike again, cleaner this time, the motion fluid. The wood splits with a satisfying crack, revealing pale, dry heartwood inside. A strange but true practice among some pioneers was to warm their tools by the fire before use. They claimed the heat made the metal less brittle. You decide to try it. Back inside, you rest the axe head near the hearth until the frost fades from its surface. The blade glows faintly in the firelight, and when you touch it, it feels alive again, like it remembers its purpose. You run your thumb along the edge and think about the blacksmith who forged it. Perhaps he stood in a smoky workshop somewhere far from this wilderness, hammering iron that would one day split the wood, keeping you alive. You feel connected to him through that shared motion of work and survival. The cabin smells of smoke and metal now, a scent that feels oddly comforting. You sharpen the axe on a whetstone, listening to the faint rasp of steel on stone. The sound is steady and deliberate, a reminder that patience is its own kind of warmth. There is an entry in an early settler's notebook that describes how people stored their tools near the hearth, not just to keep them warm, but because they believed iron absorbed the strength of fire. When used the next day, it would strike truer. You smile as you lay your tools near the embers. You do not know if the belief is true, but the idea feels right. Fire and iron, heat and will, all part of the same story. Outside, the forest groans softly as the sun climbs higher. Icicles drip from the roof, each drop a spark of light before it vanishes. You step out again, your axe warm now in your hands, and get back to work. The rhythm returns easily. The logs split cleaner, the pile grows. Every piece of wood is a future hour of warmth, a promise in tangible form. As you work, you notice the way the sound of your swings echoes differently today. The snow absorbs some of it, making it softer, almost musical. You pause and let the silence fill the gaps between strokes. The world feels both infinite and very small at once. When your arms begin to ache, you rest the axe against the log pile and stretch. The forest glitters with frost, the trees standing like pillars of glass. You can hear a raven calling somewhere far away. The sound feels like company. You return to the cabin, muscles burning but satisfied. Inside, the air is thick with warmth. You hang your axe by the door, the blade gleaming faintly in the firelight. The tools rest there like loyal sentinels, silent and patient, waiting for tomorrow. As evening falls, you sit near the fire and look at your hands. They are rough, lined with small cuts and bruises, but they are alive, strong, capable. You realize that in this world, tools are not separate from you. They are extensions of your will, proof that you are not powerless against the elements. You stretch out your fingers, letting the firelight glimmer on your skin and the faint smudge of iron dust still clinging to it. The day's labor fades from pain to peace. Outside, the snow settles again. Inside, your tools rest warm by the hearth, and for a moment, you feel that you too have been forged and tempered by the cold. The morning light spills across the floor in narrow beams, catching the dust and smoke that linger in the cabin air. You rub your hands together and stretch, still sore from the day before. The tools hang neatly by the door, their edges catching the faint glimmer of sunlight. But today, your work is different. The wood is chopped, the fire is strong, and what you need now is something softer, something that will cling to your body and keep the heat from escaping. According to letters from early homesteads, clothing often meant the difference between survival and suffering. Wool was prized, not just for comfort, but because it could trap warmth even when damp. The settlers called it a blessing from the sheep and treated every thread as gold. You pick up a folded shirt near the fire, one you spun yourself from coarse yarn months ago. It is rough against the skin, but it smells faintly of smoke and life. One curious record for Pennsylvania farm wife mentions a fabric called linsey woolsey, woven with linen in the warp and wool in the weft. It was scratchy, uneven, and tough enough to survive almost anything. People joked that it could stand up on its own if left in the corner. Still, it was beloved. Clothes made from it held body heat like nothing else. You imagine the women who wove it, their fingers raw from the loom, their hearts determined to outwit the cold. Academic notes suggest that settlers brought European weaving traditions but adapted them to what they had. In the absence of flax or sheep, they used cotton, nettle fiber, or even shredded bark. You find that thought fascinating, that ingenuity was always born out of limitation. Here, nothing went to waste. You pull the coarse shirt over your head and feel its warmth almost immediately. The fibers are uneven, some stiff, others soft, but they cling to you like armor. The collar scratches your neck, but you do not care. The sensation feels alive, real, grounding. You pull on a pair of wool trousers, heavy and thick, then wrap your feet in worn socks that smell faintly of lanolin. The oil from the wool is still there, sealing out the damp. There's an odd belief recorded in old mountain settlements that sleeping in wool drew away bad dreams. Some said it was because the fabric came from a living creature carrying warmth that remembered life. You smile as you think about that, brushing ash from your sleeve. Maybe warmth has its own kind of spirit, one that can comfort even the mind. You open a small chest near your bed and take out a folded piece of fur, a fox pelt, soft and faded. You drape it across your shoulders and stand near the hearth. The contrast of fur and fire is pleasing, one a gift from the forest, the other from your labor. You think of the many people who once did the same, each wrapped in whatever materials they could find, every layer another plea to the universe for mercy. In one traveler's journal, a woman wrote of using feathers and moss to line her shoes. She said it made every step feel like walking on springtime. You picture that now and laugh softly. Out here, small comforts matter. You glance down at your boots, cracked and stiff, and wonder how long before they finally surrender to the snow. The air in the cabin is warming now. You lift your shirt slightly and feel the trapped heat underneath. It is surprising how quickly the layers work together. The scratchy fabric that once felt unbearable now feels like safety. You remember reading how pioneers used to wear the same wool garments for weeks, washing them rarely, since the natural oils kept out dirt and water. Hygiene was a lesser concern than heat. There is a superstition from Scandinavian settlers that spinning wool during a snowstorm would anger the weather spirits, making the storm last longer. Women still spun, of course, but they did so quietly, humming soft songs under their breath. You hum now, too, without meaning to, the sound blending with the crackle of the fire. It feels like a thread connecting you backward through time. Experts note that the texture of homemade wool was never uniform. Some fibers itched, others glowed in the light like silk. That imperfection carried a kind of beauty. It reflected the hands that made it, the environment that shaped it, and the unpolished truth of survival. You look at your sleeve again, its uneven weave, and think it might be the most honest garment you own. Outside, the sky brightens to a pale grey, heavy with new snow. You hear the faint rustle of wind brushing against the walls. Inside, the air smells faintly of lanolin and ash, earthy and warm. You sit on your stool near the fire, wrapping a strip of wool around your wrist to mend a tear. The rhythm of needle and thread slows your heartbeat. The sound of the wool sliding through cloth is soft, soothing. You finish the repair and hold the sleeve to your face. The fabric is warm from your hands, and for a brief moment, you close your eyes and breathe deeply. You can smell the sheep, the smoke, the faint salt of your skin. It smells like persistence itself. A diary from 1798 tells of a man who buried his only wool coat each summer to protect it from moths, digging it up again when the frost returned. When he died, his son found it perfectly preserved, still smelling faintly of the earth that kept it safe. You think about that story and realize how much of warmth is borrowed from patience. The fire snaps, sending a spark upward. You pull the fox fur tighter around your shoulders and smile. You have enough wood, enough light, and enough fabric to see you through the night. The cold may rule outside, but here, wrapped in wool and faith, you feel untouchable for just a little while. The storm breaks in the middle of the night, the kind of blizzard that howls like a living thing. You wake to the sound of wind scraping against the roof, snow piling faster than your mind can grasp. The cabin trembles as if it is breathing through its seams. You pull the blanket around your shoulders and sit up, your eyes adjusting to the faint orange glow of dying coals. Every sound outside feels exaggerated, stretched by the darkness. Then, over the roar of wind, you hear something else. Laughter. At first, you think it must be the wind twisting through the chimney. But then it comes again, soft and real, high and musical. You stand and move closer to the window, brushing frost from the oiled paper. Nothing, only white, swirling shapes beyond. You realize the sound is not coming from outside at all. It is within the cabin, faint but clear. It is a memory, not a presence. You smile to yourself, shaking off the sleep. That sound reminds you of stories you've heard about how children on the frontier kept themselves warm. There was no such thing as idle time during winter. According to family journals, games were not only entertainment, they were strategy. Children were told to move constantly, to stomp their feet, clap their hands, sing loudly, anything that would keep blood flowing. Warmth was earned through play. A curious passage from a diary written in 1813 describes a game called Shadow Tales. Children would sit near the fire and use their hands to shape animals in the flickering light, inventing stories as they went. The one who made everyone laugh the most was declared King of the Fire for the night. You can almost picture them now, faces glowing in orange light, laughter rising above the wind's mournful cry outside. Some historians note that play was more than distraction, it was medicine. In communities where fear and silence pressed down like frost, laughter lifted spirits and reminded families that life still moved forward. You feel that truth in your chest. Even now, the sound of imagined laughter warms the air better than flame. You toss another log into the hearth, and the fire catches quickly, filling the cabin with bright light. The shadows dance across the walls, and for a moment, they look like children at play. You sit on the stool, watching them move, the shapes shifting with every flicker. It is easy to believe that ghosts of joy linger in old wood. There is an odd bit of folklore about how settlers believed children's laughter could drive away bad weather. If the blizzard raged too long, families would gather the youngest by the fire and make them tell stories or sing songs. The noise, they said, would confuse the storm's spirit. Whether it worked or not, no one could say, but the laughter at least made the waiting bearable. You hum softly, a tune you half remember from some other life. It fills the cabin with small comfort. The firelight grows warmer, reaching into every corner, painting the walls in amber. You can almost imagine small hands tapping on the floor, small feet shuffling near the hearth. The image makes you laugh quietly to yourself. Experts, studying pioneer diaries, often mention how isolation during winter changed the rhythm of families. Days lost their shape, nights stretched endlessly. Games and songs created a sense of time, a way to mark one day from another. You think of that now, realizing how easy it is to lose the hours in this quiet world. You pick up a small piece of wood and carve absently with your knife, shaping a little figure, a rough doll perhaps, or just something to keep your hands busy. The wood curls away in thin shavings, the scent of pine sweet and steady. The act itself is soothing. Maybe this is your own kind of game, the way you talk back to loneliness. A diary from a woman living in the Illinois frontier tells of making dolls from corn husks for her children. She wrote that the dolls had no faces, so the children could imagine them happy or sad, brave or frightened, depending on their own feelings that day. You turn the little carving over in your hand and think how clever that is, how comfort can be carved from the simplest things. Outside, the storm grows louder, its rhythm uneven now, like breath caught in panic. The walls rattle, and flakes of snow fall through the chimney, landing on the hot stones with faint hisses. You poke the fire, feeding it another log, and the sound steadies your nerves. One traveler once claimed that settlers could tell how bad a storm would be by how the fire behaved. If it hissed and danced wildly, the worst was yet come. If it burned steady and low, the storm had already passed. You study your flame now, calm and tall, and take it as a good omen. You lean back, the carved figure resting in your palm. It feels warm from your touch, its edges smooth now. You place it near the hearth, beside a candle stub, and let the light fall across it. In this small glow, it looks almost alive. The laughter you imagined earlier seems to linger in the air, faint but comforting. You close your eyes and listen. The blizzard still roars outside, but the sound feels distant, softened by the warmth within. The cabin has become a pocket of life inside a storm that could erase the world. You stretch out on your bed, pulling the blanket over your shoulders. The fire hums quietly, the storm sighs beyond the walls, and between them, the imagined laughter continues soft, human, and full of defiance. You smile as you drift toward sleep, knowing that warmth sometimes begins not in flame or fabric, but in the fragile, beautiful noise of joy refusing to die. The smell of smoke greets you before your eyes open. The fire has burned low again, the coals pulsing faintly in the grey dawn. Your stomach growls softly, and you remember what day it is. Today you will cook, not to celebrate anything, not even to feast, just to stay alive and to bring back the kind of warmth that starts from within. According to the journals of early homesteaders, food was more than nourishment during a frontier winter. It was heat you could taste. Heavy stews, breads baked on flat stones, thick porridges of cornmeal or oats, all were chosen not for flavor, but for the warmth they gave long after eating. You moved toward the small shelf near the hearth, your pantry of sorts. A few dried beans, a handful of cornmeal, a slab of salt pork. Not much, but enough. You fill the blackened pot with water from the bucket, cracking the ice at its surface with the back of your knife. The sound rings out sharply, like glass breaking. You hang the pot above the coals and sit close, feeling the faint steam rise as it begins to warm. Soon the smell of smoke mingles with that of pork fat melting into the water. The scent is heavy, comforting, almost hypnotic. In one surviving letter from a Massachusetts settler, a woman wrote that she could tell the weather by how quickly her stew thickened. If the cold creeps through the pot, she said, I stir faster, for fear it might creep through me next. You stir your own pot now, watching the surface tremble and blur. There is something meditative about the movement. The spoon scrapes the bottom, slow and steady, each turn a quiet defiance of the cold. A peculiar recipe passed through old Appalachian families called for baking small cakes of cornmeal, water, and lard directly on the hot stones near the fire. They called them ash cakes. You decide to try one, pressing the soft dough between your palms and placing it carefully near the glowing edge of the hearth. The smell fills the cabin instantly, earthy and warm. The hiss of fat on stones sounds like applause. Scholars still puzzle over how the settlers managed to survive on such limited food. Some believe the body simply adapted, learning to stretch the value of every bite. Others suggest that the comfort of a hot meal mattered more than its nutrition. You lean toward the second theory. As the stew thickens and the cakes brown, the cabin already feels warmer, the air richer with scent and purpose. You reach for a wooden spoon and taste the broth. It burns your tongue slightly, but the salt and fat spread through you like a spark catching kindling. The warmth climbs from your throat to your chest, slow and steady. You close your eyes for a moment, savoring it. This is what the settlers must have felt when they spoke of eating warmth. An odd superstition from the northern colonies claimed that blowing on hot food would send its spirit away, taking luck with it. People were told to wait patiently, to let the steam cool on its own. You think of that as you sip carefully, letting the heat linger. The patience feels almost ceremonial. Outside, the storm has quieted. You can hear the faint drip of melting snow from the roof, each drop striking the frozen ground with a dull rhythm. Inside, your cabin smells alive again. Smoke, salt, grain, and pork, all blending into the scent of survival. You flip the ash cakes and brush the soot from their edges. The bottoms are crisp and golden, the tops pale and steaming. You set them beside the pot and tear one in half. The texture is rough, but the taste surprises you. It is sweet in a humble way, with the faint smokiness of the hearth. You chew slowly, each bite filling your chest with warmth that spreads outward like sunlight. A traveler once wrote that the sound of bubbling stew was the closest thing to music the frontier had. You can hear it now, a low murmur under the crackle of the fire. It fills the cabin with rhythm, the kind that feels alive and human. You add a few beans to the pot and watch them sink, thinking of how such simple things, water, salt, grain, could hold so much meaning. In the flickering light, the steam rising from the pot looks almost like breath. You imagine that the cabin itself is alive, eating alongside you, the logs and stones soaking in the same warmth. For a moment, you feel less alone. You finish your meal slowly, savoring the last mouthfuls. The broth leaves your lips warm, your fingertips tingling. You set the spoon aside and lean back, feeling the fullness spread through you like calm after a long storm. A journal from a traveling preacher once described how settlers ended every meal with quiet gratitude, even when the food was barely enough. They would sit in silence, watching the fire, as if listening for something. You find yourself doing the same. The flames flicker and pop, the stew simmers softly, and somewhere far away, a branch breaks under the weight of snow. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The smell of food still hangs in the air, thick and comforting. Outside, the cold waits patiently, but it will have to wait a little longer. You are warm from the inside now, filled with the simple triumph of having turned raw hunger into light. The cabin smells like life itself. Smoke, sweat, pork fat, and the faint sweetness of charred corn hang in the air, clinging to everything. You sit quietly by the fire, full and drowsy, the taste of the stew still on your tongue. The warmth that started in your stomach has spread through your limbs, softening the ache in your muscles. It is not clean or perfumed air, not pleasant by any civilized measure, yet it feels like home. Accounts written by travelers through the American frontier often mention this same smell. They described cabins that reeked of wood smoke and animal tallow, of damp wool and sour bread, of life condensed into four tight walls. One man called it the perfume of survival, an odor that marked the difference between those who endured and those who fled. You breathe it in deeply, knowing he was right. The smoke rises in gentle ribbons, curling near the ceiling, and you can see how it stains everything it touches. The rafters are dark and sticky, the corners lined with soot. You run a finger along the wall and leave a pale streak. The texture feels gritty, almost oily. In another life it would be dirt. Here, it is history, a record written in ash. A peculiar belief from some old Appalachian settlers claimed that a smoky house was a lucky house. If the air was clear, it meant the fire was weak or the spirits of warmth had left. The idea makes you smile. Maybe luck is just the patience to sit inside your own smoke long enough to appreciate it. Experts continue to discuss what life actually smelled like in those cabins. Some describe it as unbearable, unwashed bodies, livestock close by, rotting hides curing in corners. Others insist that it was grounding, even comforting, because every scent had meaning. The smell of smoke meant warmth. The smell of wool meant safety. The smell of tallow meant light. You lean back and let those layers of scent wrap around you like memory. There's an old diary entry by a woman who wrote that she could tell what time of day it was by the smell of her cabin. Morning carried the scent of ashes and cold iron. Noon smelled like flour dust and boiled grain. Night smelled like sweat, leather, and the faint sweetness of cooling wood. You think about that as the fire burns lower, realizing how scent is another way of measuring life. You add a handful of pine needles to the hearth just to change the air. They sizzle, releasing a fresh burst of resin. The smell is sharp, bright, and fleeting. It cuts through the heaviness for a moment before fading back into smoke. You breathe it in, grateful for the brief illusion of a forest indoors. A curious superstition said that burning pine needles could drive away loneliness. Some settlers swore that the scent reminded them of summer fields and green branches, tricking their hearts into hope. You can understand that. The cabin feels lighter already, the walls less heavy, as if they too remember what warmth once smelled like in the open air. The logs shift in the hearth, collapsing in on themselves. The fire releases a deep sigh, sending another wave of smoke through the room. You cough once, but you keep watching it, fascinated by the way the air shimmers in the light. It is both beautiful and oppressive, like the breath of some giant creature sharing your space. Outside, the snow has stopped falling. You can tell by the silence. The world has gone still again, waiting. Inside, everything hums faintly. The crack of wood, the drip of melting ice, the slow settling of warmth into every surface. The smells seem to thicken, binding together into something that feels alive. In one letter written by a frontier preacher, he noted that the scent of smoke clung to his Bible pages so strongly that even after years back east, it followed him wherever he went. He said it made him feel both ashamed and nostalgic. You imagine that, the smell of wilderness trapped in sacred words, a reminder that holiness and hardship often share the same air. You move closer to the hearth, holding your palms to the heat. Your skin smells faintly of ash and animal fat. You rub your hands together, watching the fine black dust collect in the lines of your palms. It feels strange to think that warmth has a texture, but here it does. A family legend from the Northern Territories claimed that the scent of smoke on a person's skin kept away frostbite. It was not science, only faith. But perhaps faith is enough. You look at your hands again and smile. They smell like the fire's memory, proof that you have not frozen yet. You lie back on your bed, eyes half open, staring at the smoky beams above. The light from the fire flickers across them, turning soot into a shifting canvas of shadows. You can almost see shapes in it, faces, perhaps, or moments you've already lived. The air feels thick, but you do not mind. It is the air of survival, and it belongs to you. As the flames die lower, you close your eyes and breathe deeply once more. The smell of smoke settles in your lungs, heavy and real. Tomorrow the air will smell the same, and the day after that too. It will cling to your clothes, your hair, your dreams, but you would not trade it for anything. It is the smell of endurance, the quiet perfume of staying alive in a place that wants you gone. The night sky glows faintly outside your window, a dull reflection of the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. You sit by the fire, half asleep, when a faint knock interrupts the rhythm of the night. At first you think it is the wind, the wood shifting under frost, but then it comes again soft, deliberate. You freeze, your breath caught mid-air. Visitors in winter are rare. Travel between cabins is dangerous, the snow swallowing roads and trails alike. Yet on the frontier, a knock at the door is never ignored. You rise, wrap your blanket around your shoulders, and open it carefully. A rush of cold air spills in, along with a figure hunched in the storm. A man stands there, his beard crusted with ice, eyes sunken from exhaustion. You recognize him faintly, a trapper from the next valley, perhaps 3 miles away. His gloved hand clutches a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Without a word, you step aside and motion him in. The rules of survival demand hospitality. Historical letters from settlers often describe such visits as both blessing and burden. Strangers could bring stories, laughter, and warmth, but they could also bring hunger, disease, or bad news. Hospitality was a gamble, yet refusing a traveler in winter was unthinkable. People depended on each other's doors staying open, especially when the world turned white and silent. The man steps in slowly, his boots leaving small puddles of melting snow on the floor. You close the door behind him, trapping the warmth inside again. He nods once in thanks, his face too frozen for words. You gesture toward the fire, and he lowers himself near it, stretching out his hands. Steam rises from his clothes, carrying the sharp scent of wet leather and smoke. You pour him a tin cup of warm broth from the pot near the hearth. He drinks greedily, his hands trembling. The sound of the wind outside fades, replaced by the small symphony of fire crackle and dripping snow. He finally speaks, his voice hoarse. Couldn't stay alone another night. You nod. There is nothing to say that he does not already know. A curious story in a traveler's diary tells of how frontier families would keep a single candle burning in the window during harsh winters. It was a signal to lost wanderers that warmth and food waited inside. Some historians call it the ancestor of the porch light. You glance at your window now, where your candle still glows faintly against the snow. Maybe that is what led him here. Researchers still discuss how far that culture of open hospitality extended. Some insist it was born of necessity, others that it reflected a moral code older than the frontier itself. You believe it was both. Out here, kindness and survival were the same thing. The man eats in silence, tearing off a piece of your remaining bread. His hands shake less now, color returning to his cheeks. You can see how thin he is, how hollow his eyes have become from solitude. It is a mirror of your own reflection, perhaps, had no one found your door. He speaks again after a while, his voice softer now. He tells you of another cabin downriver that collapsed under the weight of ice. He says no one survived. You feel the weight of his words, but you do not look away. Loss is part of this landscape, as familiar as the cold itself. A strange superstition whispered among some pioneers said that souls lost in winter storms returned as snowflakes, small and countless, falling softly to find their way home. You do not know if you believe that, but when the wind presses against the walls again, you think of it. Perhaps the air outside is filled with more than just ice. The man finishes eating and leans back, his face reflecting the firelight. You pour him another cup and feel something shift in the air. The cabin, once silent, now holds two breaths, two heartbeats, two small pieces of life pushing back against the vast quiet outside. The warmth feels stronger already. In one of the oldest journals found in a frontier attic, a woman wrote that the best warmth came not from the hearth, but from the company gathered around it. The flame burns higher, she said, when another soul sits beside it. You look at the fire now and swear she was right. The stranger thanks you in a low voice. He unwraps his bundle to reveal what he has brought in return: a small pouch of dried berries and a strip of smoked venison. The gift is simple but sincere. You accept it without words. Out here, gratitude is a quiet transaction, measured in survival, not ceremony. He settles onto the floor near the hearth, his body curled close to the flames. You add another log to the fire, watching it catch. The glow deepens, filling every shadow with a soft orange pulse. For the first time in days, the cabin feels alive with conversation, even if neither of you speaks again. Outside, the wind shifts direction, sighing against the roof instead of battering it. You take it as a sign. Inside, the warmth grows steady. Two lives, one fire, one fragile peace. You lie back on your straw bed and listen to the quiet rhythm of another person breathing beside you. Tomorrow he may leave again, vanishing into the white. But tonight, there is company. Tonight, there is proof that warmth shared is warmth multiplied. You close your eyes and smile faintly, the glow of the fire painting the room gold, the storm outside retreating one slow breath at a time. You wake to the sound of humming. For a moment you do not recognize it, soft and steady, blending with the crackle of the fire. Then you remember the man sleeping near the hearth. He is awake before you, sitting upright, sharpening his knife in a slow rhythm that sounds almost like music. You rise quietly, not wanting to startle him. The smell of smoke and broth lingers in the air, mingled now with the faint sweetness of melting snow. He looks up and nods once, a wordless good morning. You nod back. Words feel unnecessary in this quiet. Outside, the sky glows pale grey through the oiled paper window, promising more snow before nightfall. The cabin feels smaller now, but warmer too. Two bodies mean twice the breath, twice the warmth, and perhaps twice the noise to keep the cold at bay. According to old letters from frontier families, mornings often began with sound before words. Music, humming, even the scraping of tools helped ease the silence that winter pressed into every cabin. It was a way to remind the walls that life still moved within them. You listen to the rhythm of his blade against the stone, steady and deliberate, and it comforts you. One peculiar detail recorded in an 1820 diary tells how settlers used music to measure time. A fiddle tune might last long enough for a loaf to bake or for soup to thicken. In that sense, songs were not just entertainment but clocks that carried warmth through repetition. You hum now, echoing the rhythm, and the man smiles faintly. The sound fills the small space like a blanket. Experts note that music on the frontier was as practical as it was emotional. Instruments were scarce, so people made their own fiddles carved from local wood, drums from hollowed stumps, flutes from river reeds. Every note tied the living to the land. You imagine families gathering around fires like yours, using songs to keep their hands busy and their hearts from freezing. The man sets down his knife and reaches into his pack. He pulls out something wrapped in cloth, a small fiddle, worn and dark from years of travel. The sight of it feels like a gift. Without speaking, he checks the strings and begins to play. The first notes are rough, hesitant, but then the melody finds its shape. It's a tune both mournful and warm, the kind that makes the air hum in your chest. The sound fills the cabin completely. It seems impossible that something so delicate could stand against the cold, but it does. The music carries light in a way fire cannot. The rhythm dances with the shadows on the walls. And for a moment, the cabin feels larger, as if its walls have stretched outward to make room for the sound. A curious superstition from Irish settlers claimed that fiddles had souls. If you played them kindly, they would protect your house from lightning. If you ignored them too long, they would crack in resentment. You look at the man's instrument now, its surface scarred but shining in the firelight, and wonder how many storms it has seen. You reach for a small tin mug and pour him some warm water. When the song ends, he accepts it with a nod. The silence afterward feels different, peaceful rather than empty. You can still hear the echo of the melody in your head, circling softly. A traveller once wrote that music in a cabin made the cold itself pause, as if the frost were listening. You think of that now, half expecting the wind outside to answer. But there is only quiet, the faint hiss of snow slipping from the roof, and the low hum of the fire. The man begins to hum again, this time inviting you to join. You follow hesitantly, your voice low and uncertain. Together, the sound grows into something simple and pure. It is not a song you recognize, yet it feels ancient, as if it has lived in the wood and smoke all along. Historians later wrote that when two strangers shared music by the fire, they stopped being strangers. You feel that truth unfolding in real time. The rhythm sinks your breaths, the air thick with shared warmth. It is the oldest kind of language sound born from survival. When the tune fades, the man lays his fiddle gently beside him and leans back. "She's tired," he says softly, meaning both the instrument and himself. You smile. The firelight flickers over his face, softening the lines of fatigue. Outside, a gust of wind shakes the door, but the cabin holds. Inside, you both sit in easy silence. The faint smell of pine and tallow lingers, mingling with the ghost of music that still vibrates in walls. A line from an old homesteader's letter drifts through your memory. Music keeps the frost from reaching the soul. You look at the fading coals, glowing red like a heartbeat, and you understand it now. The melody still hums somewhere inside you, gentle and steady, as if it has decided to stay. The man stretches out near the fire again, his breath already slowing towards sleep. You sit a little longer, letting the warmth and the silence settle. The cabin is still, but the air seems to shimmer faintly, carrying the echo of the tune like a promise. You close your eyes, resting your head against the wall. The fire pops once, softly, and you smile. In the deep quiet of the frontier night, the last note of the fiddle lingers in your chest, a reminder that even here, at the edge of the world, music can make a home. The fire burns low again by morning, and the stranger is already gone. He has left quietly, taking only his fiddle and the pack he came with. The snow outside is marked by his footprints, a winding trail disappearing into the grey distance. You stand by the door for a moment, staring after him, the silence pressing close once more. Then you close the door and turn toward the hearth. It is time to make something warm to drink, something to drive the cold out from the inside. According to journals kept by frontier families, settlers relied heavily on homemade remedies during the long winters. They mixed herbs, bark, and roots into teas and tinctures that promised to warm the body or steady the nerves. Some of those brews worked, some did not, but all gave people the feeling that they were fighting back. You find that thought comforting as you set your pot of water over the fire. You reach into the small pouch the traveller left behind. Inside are dried berries, wrinkled and deep red. You drop a handful into the water, along with a sliver of bark from your small stash of willow and a spoonful of honey you have been saving. The mixture darkens slowly, releasing a faint aroma of earth and fruit. The scent fills the cabin, gentle but alive. One curious note from a frontier doctor mentions how settlers believed strong drinks like whiskey or rum could keep the chill from settling in the bones. Others swore by mixtures of vinegar and pepper. You pour a few drops of the leftover whiskey from your flask into the pot and watch it hiss as it touches the heat. The smell sharpens, heady and bright, cutting through the morning gloom. Experts continue to argue about whether alcohol truly helped or only made the cold more bearable. Some say it numbed the pain but slowed the heartbeat, tricking the body into thinking it was warm. Others claim it saved more lives than it harmed. You can feel both truths in the first sip. The liquid burns its way down your throat, spreading fire into your chest. It is not medicine, but it feels like it. A curious folk practice from the northern colonies described a brew called switch tea. It was made by boiling pine needles until the air filled with the scent of resin. The settlers believed it could cure almost anything, from frostbite to despair. You smile as you imagine them, huddled around smoky pots, sipping their forest-flavored hope. You drop a few needles into your own drink just to see if they were right. The flavor is bitter, but the warmth spreads quickly. It tastes like the forest floor, like sap and smoke, like the memory of green things under snow. You sip slowly, savoring each mouthful. The drink warms your face, your hands, even your breath. For the first time in days, you feel truly awake. There is an old superstition that steam rising from a hot drink carries your thoughts to the sky. People would blow softly over their cups to send wishes or prayers into the air. You do the same now, watching the thin tendrils twist upward, vanishing into the dim rafters. You do not speak your wish aloud. It feels enough to let the warmth carry it. A story from a preacher's memoir tells of how settlers gathered at night to share their strongest remedies. They called it swapping cures. One might bring spruce tea, another a poultice of bear grease and garlic. They traded laughter as freely as recipes. The gatherings were less about medicine than about community. You think of that now as you sit alone, the memory of music still humming faintly in your ears from the night before. The drink in your cup cools slowly. You take another sip, and the bitterness fades into something gentler. The scent of berries and honey clings to the air, soft and rich. You imagine how it might have felt to share this moment with others, to pass the cup and listen to their stories. Warmth grows stronger when shared. The fire snaps, a single bright sound in the quiet. You glance toward the small window. Outside, the snow glitters faintly under a weak strip of sunlight. The world looks fragile, suspended between beauty and exhaustion. Inside, the cabin glows with the color of the drink in your hands, deep red, alive, stubborn. There is another old remedy you remember reading about, a concoction of milk, hot stones and molasses, said to heat the blood. You imagine it, thick and strange, a kind of primitive comfort. Every culture has found its own way to transform hunger and chill into something that tastes like hope. You finish the last of your brew and set the cup aside. The taste lingers on your tongue, sharp and sweet. Your body feels lighter, your mind clear. Maybe it is the herbs, maybe the whiskey, or maybe just the ritual of it, the act of caring for yourself in a place that does not care back. Outside, the wind starts to rise again, brushing against the walls like a restless hand. You add another log to the fire and lean back, closing your eyes for a moment. The warmth inside you holds steady. You imagine the traveler out there somewhere, following his trail through the snow, the same heat burning quietly in his chest. You whisper a small thank you to the empty room. The steam from the pot drifts upward, carrying your breath and your gratitude with it. You are alone again, but not lonely. The warmth stays, moving through you like a promise that the cold will never have all of you. The night settles early, pressing its weight against the cabin walls. You sit by the fire with your blanket wrapped tight around your shoulders, the last of the berry tea still warming your hands. The air outside is a vast hush, the kind that swallows sound completely. It is the hour when the forest sleeps, and only the hidden creatures stir. You lean closer to the hearth, listening to the crackle of wood and the faint rustle below the floorboards. At first you think it is the wind again, but the sound is steady and alive, a soft shifting like straw moving. Then you hear the unmistakable snort of breath. You freeze, waiting. Another sound follows, low and wet, like a snuffle. It takes a moment to understand. The animals beneath the cabin have woken. Historical notes from frontier diaries often mention that livestock sometimes shared space with the family during harsh winters. Some cabins were built directly above a low dugout or pen, where pigs, goats, or dogs could shelter. The heat from their bodies rose through the floor, providing a kind of living furnace. It sounds crude, yet it saved lives. You crouch down, pressing your ear to the boards, and the sound grows clearer, a soft rhythm of movement, breathing, and quiet snorts. A curious entry from a New York settler in 1799 describes this practice as the warmth of humble company. He wrote that the cow beneath his floor gave off enough heat to keep the water in his bucket from freezing. You picture it now, a hidden world below your feet, fur and straw and steaming breath rising gently through the cracks. You smile at the thought. Researchers have suggested that this strange arrangement blurred the boundaries between human and animal life on the frontier. Families depended on their beasts not just for food or labor, but for heat, companionship, and sound. You feel that truth as you listen. The noises below are not disturbing, they are reassuring. Each small movement feels like a heartbeat beneath the floor, steady and alive. You toss another log into the fire, and the light flickers across the room. Shadows shift along the walls, and you notice how they sway in rhythm with the sounds below. The whole cabin seems to breathe together, a slow pulse of warmth rising from earth to ceiling. You realize that you are not truly alone. A curious superstition recorded in a mountain settlement claimed that if a family kept animals close during winter, their dreams would merge. People said they woke, remembering the same visions their beasts saw: fields, sunlight, open spaces. It sounds foolish, but as you close your eyes for a moment, the thought comforts you. Maybe it is a kind of mercy to share dreams when the world outside is frozen. You sit back up and listen again. The steady rhythm continues, and you catch the faintest sound of a tail thumping lazily. Probably a dog, maybe two. You whisper softly toward the floor, not words but a tone of recognition, and the sound below pauses, then resumes. The animals hear you. They know you are there. In one old diary, a woman wrote that she thanked her goat every morning for surviving the night because she believed its warmth kept her children alive. We share the same breath, she wrote, and thus the same morning. You glance at the small wisp of smoke rising from your fire and wonder if that same exchange is happening now, life shared quietly between one creature and another, across thin layers of wood and straw. The fire burns lower, its light glowing soft and golden. You sit in that glow, the rhythm beneath you steady as a lullaby. The air is thick with scent wood smoke, wool, and the faint musky warmth drifting up from below. It is not unpleasant. It is earthy, real, a reminder that warmth has never been elegant. It has always been shared. Experts writing about early homesteads often describe how settlers measured the health of their animals not only in strength or milk, but in warmth. A cow that gave steady heat through the floor was said to be good-hearted. You think of that now and chuckle quietly. The world may have grown more complex, but kindness from any source still feels the same. You shift closer to the fire, stretching your legs. The boards beneath you radiate a faint heat, subtle but constant. It surprises you how strong it feels once you notice it. The animals stir again, perhaps restless, perhaps dreaming. Their quiet grunts mingle with the soft popping of the logs, blending into one long rhythm of survival. Outside, snow begins to fall again, brushing softly against the roof. The world is white and endless, But inside this little cabin, there are layers of life stacked together. Flame, breath, fur, and heartbeat. You imagine the warmth rising like invisible smoke, curling around you and up toward the rafters, carrying the sound of life itself. You lean back against the wall, feeling the hum beneath the floor vibrate faintly through your spine. Your eyelids grow heavy. You realize the animals below are settling again, their breathing slowing to match your own. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full of trust, the shared stillness of creatures surviving side by side. Before you drift into sleep, you whisper a small thank you into the air, unsure if you are speaking to the fire, the animals, or the house itself. It does not matter. The warmth belongs to all of you now, and in this fragile balance of breath and flame, you find a peace that feels almost eternal. You wake in half light, the kind that blurs dawn and dusk together. For a moment, you do not know if it is morning or evening. The fire glows faintly, its embers pulsing like the heart of something patient and ancient. The air feels heavy but calm, the kind of calm that always makes you suspicious. Then, you hear it, a soft, distant hooting sound drifting through the forest. You listen closely. Another hoot answers. The owls are awake. That means snow is coming again. Settlers who lived close to the land learned to read the weather not from the sky but from its smallest voices. They watched smoke, listened to birds, tasted the wind. Nature was their only forecast, and sometimes it was generous enough to warn them. You stand and step outside, boots crunching on hard snow, and tilt your head toward the clouds. They hang low and grey, motionless. The air feels thick, almost electric. One traveller's journal from 1797 describes how pioneers believed they could smell a storm before it arrived. He wrote that the scent was like wet iron and pine sap mixed in the air. You inhale deeply and catch that same faint sharpness, the smell of cold metal hidden behind the sweetness of wood. The storm is coming, no doubt. You step back inside to prepare. On the frontier, weather signs were part science and part folklore. Some said that if smoke rose straight into the air, the sky would stay calm, but if it twisted or clung low, trouble was near. You glance at your fire and see the smoke curling unevenly before slipping sideways up the chimney. It's decided. You will need to be ready for another siege of snow. You begin to gather what you can. More wood from the stack inside, a few handfuls of dried moss for kindling, your last small stores of grain and beans. Every task feels rehearsed now, a rhythm your body remembers before your mind does. This is what life has become: preparation and waiting, endless cycles of defense against the cold. There's a strange little note found in an old homestead ledger that reads, "The wind talks truer than the preacher." It makes you smile. You understand what they meant. Out here you do not learn from words, but from whispers, the soft crackle of frost, the groan of the trees, the hiss of snow sliding from the roof. Each sound is a sentence if you learn how to listen. You kneel by the window and wipe away a thin layer of frost from the oiled paper. Outside, flakes have begun to fall, slow and steady. The forest looks hushed, every branch heavy with ice. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the creak of wood splitting in the cold. You whisper softly to yourself, not out of fear, but as if greeting an old, familiar rival. A curious superstition from the upper valleys said that snow was alive. It listened, it waited, and if you spoke too harshly, it would take offense. Families whispered during storms, keeping their voices low, as though respecting a sleeping god. You find yourself following that instinct now, moving quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile peace around you. Scholars writing about early settlers often mention how they developed their own language of weather. To them, the sky was never empty. A dark ring around the moon was a wolf's collar. A sudden warm gust was a devil's sigh. The names gave character to the cold, turning fear into familiarity. You murmur the phrases now, tasting them like spells. It feels strangely powerful to speak the same language of survival that others once whispered centuries before. The fire burns brighter as you feed it. Sparks leap upward and fade, tiny stars trapped inside wood. You sit beside the hearth and wait, the air already cooling as the storm thickens. The cabin creaks softly, but it feels strong. You run your hand along the wall, grateful for its stubbornness. Through the faint hum of wind, you can hear the animals below shifting restlessly again. They sense the change too. You drop to your knees and speak to them softly through the floorboards. The sound of your voice calms them, or maybe it just calms you. Either way, the silence that follows feels gentler. A traveller's account from 1802 mentions that settlers believed in listening weather, times when the forest would fall silent just before a storm, as if the world itself were taking a breath. You recognize that silence now. It feels sacred, weighty, the moment before creation or destruction. You move one more log onto the fire, then sit back and watch the flames stretch and fold in on themselves. The wind begins to rise outside, faint at first, then stronger, whistling through the trees. Snow hits the roof in soft waves, pattering like a heartbeat. The cabin trembles slightly, but holds. You think about those who never learned these signs, who came unprepared for nature's moods. Many froze not because they lacked courage, but because they mistook silence for peace. You know better now. Silence is warning. Calm is promise. Every whisper in the wind is part of the same long conversation between you and the cold. The storm grows louder. You sit close to the fire and close your eyes, letting its warmth sink into your face. The world outside disappears, swallowed by white and sound. Inside, there is only flame and breath, both fragile, both alive. You think about how, even now, the weather speaks to you, and how each time you survive its voice, you become part of the language it leaves behind. The wind howls one final note before settling into steady rhythm. Snow falls harder, but you are ready. You pull your blanket tighter and smile faintly into the light. Let the cold speak. You already know its story. The world is white again by morning, so bright that it hurts your eyes even through the window's thin paper. You wake slowly, each movement cautious, the way people move when the air itself feels breakable. The storm has passed, but its silence remains. You sit up, pulling the blanket closer, and watch tiny flecks of frost drift from the ceiling beams. The cabin feels lighter, yet still surrounded by the weight of snow. According to settlers' journals, the morning after a heavy storm was always the most dangerous time. Snow could trap doors shut, bury paths, and collapse roofs with its sheer weight. You push gently against the door and feel the resistance, the dull pressure of a wall of snow pressing back. The thought of being sealed inside would terrify most people, but you have learned to take it as a challenge. There is a strange comfort in the work that waits. You pull on your boots, stiff with cold, and tie your scarf tightly. The air near the floor bites at your fingers. You grab your small shovel and begin chipping at the packed snow around the doorframe. Each strike echoes sharply, the sound bouncing back at you from the walls. In one letter written by a woman living in the Great Lakes region, she described snow as both enemy and savior. It cut her off from the world, but also insulated her cabin so completely that it trapped the warmth inside. You feel that contradiction as you work. Every scoop of snow you remove brings you closer to freedom, but lets in a little more cold. A curious bit of frontier folklore claimed that snowdrifts had personalities. Some were friendly, forming soft banks that could be shaped or tunneled, while others were spiteful, sliding and collapsing without warning. You do not know which kind you face today, so you move carefully, pausing every few minutes to test the weight above you. Experts note that early settlers sometimes used melted snow as drinking water, unaware of how quickly it drained their strength. The body burns more energy to warm melted snow than to drink it cold. You remember that lesson as you scoop a handful of packed ice from the doorway and toss it aside. Every motion counts. Eventually the door gives way with a muffled crack. Cold air floods the cabin, sharp as a blade. You step outside into a landscape that looks more like a dream than a world. The trees are buried halfway up their trunks, the horizon erased. The light is so bright that it feels like sound. You shield your eyes with your hand and take a few careful steps forward, feeling the snow crunch underfoot. There is no path anymore, only memory. You walk where you think the trail once lay, each step sinking to your knees. The cold sneaks through your boots, numbing your toes. You pause to look back at the cabin. From this distance it looks small and half swallowed, a mound of white with a single column of smoke curling from the chimney. It looks fragile, yet somehow unbreakable. A traveller's note from 1801 said that people learned to recognize their homes by smell when sight failed them. Every cabin had its own scent: smoke, pine, and whatever food had last been cooked. You inhale deeply and catch that same mix on the wind, faint but unmistakable. It feels like an invisible thread leading you back to safety. You take a few more steps, mostly to test the depth of the snow. Each movement sends tiny crystals flying into the air, glittering like dust caught in sunlight. The silence is so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat, slow and heavy. You stop and listen. Somewhere far off, a single crow calls out, its voice cutting through the stillness like a crack in glass. You turn back toward the cabin. Your breath fogs the air, rising and fading into the sky. For a moment you simply stand there, feeling both small and infinite, surrounded by endless white. The snow that once trapped you now feels like a shield, a quiet guardian keeping the world at a distance. A curious superstition from northern farmers said that fresh snow carried dreams from the dead. People would wake after storms claiming to have heard lost voices calling from the wind. You close your eyes for a second, listening, but hear only the soft sigh of frost settling on branches. Still, it feels like company. You make your way back inside, shaking the snow from your coat and boots. The warmth hits you immediately, wrapping your face and hands in soft relief. The fire is still alive, its glow steady and calm. You sit near it, rubbing your hands together, and feel the sting of returning heat. Experts studying cabin life often remark that recovery after each storm was a kind of ritual: clearing snow, feeding the fire, drying clothes, all small acts of defiance that reminded people of their place in the world. You feel that as you sit by the hearth now, a quiet satisfaction blooming in your chest. The cold tried, and once again, it failed. The light outside softens as afternoon fades. Through the frosted window, you can see the snow glowing faintly pink under the sinking Sunday. The world looks peaceful again, as if it never meant harm. You know better, but you still appreciate the illusion. You stretch out your legs, feeling the warmth return to your feet. The air smells faintly of smoke and pine sap. The sound of melting snow drips softly from the roof, each drop a tiny clock ticking towards spring. For now you are safe, wrapped in silence, surrounded by the proof that even in the harshest winter, you can carve a space where life continues to breathe. The light fades early tonight, slipping away before you expect it to. You sit by the fire, sharpening a piece of wood into a small peg, not because you need it, but because the motion feels good. The knife moves easily in your hand, the rhythm steady and calm. The air in the cabin smells of wood resin and melted snow, a mixture that feels ancient and familiar. You pause to listen. The world outside has gone quiet again. According to letters written by early settlers, this was the time of evening when people began to tell stories. Work was done, the cold had settled, and the fire was the only thing still moving. Storytelling was warmth for the mind, a way to stretch the spirit when the body could not. You look at the flames and imagine an audience around you, faces glowing in the light, waiting. One curious note from an 1804 diary mentions how stories were passed along like family heirlooms. A mother might tell her child the same tale her grandmother told her, word for word, so that no detail would die. You think of that now and begin to whisper softly to yourself, letting your thoughts wander toward the kind of tale they might have told here, in a place where silence ruled. You start with a memory of fire. You speak of a hunter lost in a storm who found shelter in a hollow tree and fell asleep to the heartbeat of the forest. When he woke, the snow had buried him, but he was alive because the tree had breathed with him. It's not history, not fact, but it feels right. The air seems to listen. Researchers often point out that frontier storytelling blurred the line between memory and myth. A story could be both true and imagined, shaped not by accuracy but by the need to make meaning out of hardship. You understand that now. The truth is not always in the details. It is in the warmth a tale leaves behind. A peculiar superstition recorded in a settler's notebook claimed that every lie told near a fire would burn slower, as if the flames themselves paused to listen. You glance at your hearth and smile, wondering whether your story passes the test. The fire crackles softly, neither judging nor agreeing, only moving in its patient rhythm. You add another log and continue the tale. You speak of a woman who kept a candle burning through every storm, so her husband, lost in the mountains, could find his way home. Each night the flame grew smaller, and each night she whispered his name into it. On the final night, when the candle died, he appeared at the door, carrying a piece of the same flame in his lantern. You know it's only legend, but it feels true in your chest. Experts studying folklore suggest that stories like these gave people permission to believe in mercy. When every day demanded labor and endurance, imagination became a refuge. You can feel that comfort now, how words lift you from the weight of survival and into the lighter air of wonder. You lean back, your voice fading into the firelight. The cabin hums quietly. The wind outside sighs against the roof, almost politely. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine other voices joining yours, neighbors gathered from nearby cabins, children leaning close, old men nodding along. The warmth of shared breath would fill the room, rising like incense. There's a line from an old letter you once read: "Stories are the fire we keep when the wood runs low." You repeat it softly, the words tasting both fragile and strong. The truth of it sits deep inside you. Maybe the settlers told their stories not to escape the cold, but to remind themselves that warmth could come from sound as easily as flame. You glance around the cabin. Shadows stretch across the walls, shaped by the dance of the fire. The animals below shift once, settling again. Their quiet movements add a rhythm to your words, grounding you in the real even as your thoughts drift toward the imagined. A strange belief from some mountain families claimed that if you spoke aloud enough stories during one winter, your house would remember them. The next storm, they said, would pass more gently over your roof. You think about that now and keep talking, voice low, steady, carried by the smoke curling upward. If the house remembers, then maybe it will protect you. The fire burns brighter for a moment, as if in agreement. The light fills the cabin with gold, erasing the shadows for a heartbeat. You stop speaking and listen again. The wind has quieted. The snow outside is falling softly, like a sigh. The silence that follows feels like gratitude. You sit for a while longer, letting the warmth and the stories mingle in your mind. They blur together until it becomes impossible to tell which part belongs to memory and which to imagination. The night deepens, but the fire still glows, steady and kind. You whisper one final line into the quiet, a promise to yourself and to whoever might listen in the dark. As long as I can speak, the fire will not die. The words drift upward, vanishing into the smoky rafters. You smile, pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders and close your eyes. The story remains, glowing faintly inside you, another small light against the endless winter. The fire has burned down to a low red glow when a faint sound wakes you. It is the creak of the roof, slow and deep, like an old tree shifting under the weight of years. You lie still for a moment, listening. The sound comes again, then fades. The cabin settles back into silence. You breathe out slowly, your body heavy with warmth and fatigue. The air feels thicker tonight, scented with smoke, pine, and the faint musk of the animals below. According to notes left by early settlers, the middle of winter was when fear began to visit most often. Not sudden fear, but the quiet kind that crept in during long nights. They called it the hush, a season inside a season, when people began to feel time unravel. You can sense it now, the edges of silence curling inward. Everything slows until even your heartbeat sounds too loud. One old diary from the Northern Territories describes how families fought this strange quiet by keeping something always in motion, a pot swinging gently above the fire, a string rocking from the rafters, a chair that someone rocked even while half asleep. The movement gave them the illusion that life had not stopped. You understand the wisdom in that, so you shift your blanket slightly, stirring the air, and listen to the soft rustle of fabric. A curious superstition whispered among isolated settlers said that silence too deep could draw spirits from the snow. The hush was said to be their breath, waiting for a sound to follow back inside. To break it, people sang, even badly. You smile at the thought and hum softly, your voice low and rough. The tune wavers but fills the room with small life. Researchers who studied these journals believe that long isolation blurred the line between imagination and perception. People saw figures in the smoke, faces in the frost, voices in the wind. The human mind, left too long in quiet, invented company. You cannot help but wonder if that is what you are doing now. Still, the humming comforts you, and you keep it up, letting the rhythm match the crackle of the fire. The cabin feels smaller tonight. The air is dense, as if the walls themselves are breathing. You get up slowly, wrap the blanket around your shoulders, and move toward the door. The handle is cold beneath your fingers. You open it just enough to let in a sliver of the outside world. The night air rushes in, biting your skin, but it also smells clean, sharp with frost, and faintly sweet with snow. You take a deep breath and feel the chill sting your lungs. It clears your head. Outside, the world glows pale under the light of a half-hidden moon. The snow shimmers like crushed glass, every flake reflecting the faint light. The trees stand perfectly still, branches heavy but unbroken. You step into the threshold and listen. No wind, no birds, no movement, only the soft, endless quiet. It feels like standing inside a frozen breath. A traveler once wrote that the most dangerous sound in winter was none at all. Noise meant life. Silence meant everything had given up. You hold your breath, testing the idea. The world remains still. And yet, beneath that stillness, you can sense something enormous. Not death, but waiting, the kind of patience that only nature understands. You retreat back inside, closing the door carefully. The warmth greets you instantly, heavy but kind. You sit again by the fire, your skin tingling from the cold. The room glows faintly in shades of amber and shadow. You stare into the coals and imagine faces forming within them, shifting shapes of light and memory. For a moment, you think you see your own reflection blink. You smile at your own tricked eyes. A strange note in a preacher's account says that settlers believed the fire could show your soul if you looked at it long enough. The shape of the flames, the color of the glow, even the way the embers cracked were said to reveal your state of mind. You wonder what your fire would say about you tonight. It burns steady but tired, like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. You lean back and rest your head against the wall. The wood feels warm against your hair, the faint vibration of the animals below still present. The sound soothes you. You hum again, the same tune as before, softer now. The melody fills the space between breaths, a small defiance against the hush. Experts who study life on the frontier often write that survival was not just physical but emotional. People endured because they believed in small rituals, humming, rocking, talking to the fire, whispering to animals. Each act was a thread holding the mind together. You feel that thread in your own hands now, invisible but strong. The fire shifts, sending up a thin trail of smoke that catches the light. You follow it with your eyes until it vanishes near the rafters. The air above you is thick and warm, like a second blanket. You think of the countless people who must have sat like this before you, each one wrapped in silence, each one humming their way through the endless winter. You stretch your legs and sigh. The sound breaks the quiet, but it feels good. The hush retreats for now, replaced by the gentle noises of the living, the fire's breathing, the slow pulse of warmth in your chest, the soft scraping of claws from the animals below. Everything finds its rhythm again. Before sleep takes you, you whisper into the air, not as prayer but as habit. Still here. The words sound soft but sure. The cabin seems to listen and answer with a faint creak, a language you now understand. You close your eyes, wrapped in the knowledge that survival is not just about heat or shelter, but about refusing to fall silent, even when the whole world asks you to. The morning light wakes you gently, a pale gold that slips through the frost on the window. The air is quiet but softer than before. You stretch, feeling the ache of days spent working and waiting. The cabin is still, except for the faint murmur of the animals below. When you breathe out, you notice that your breath no longer clouds the air as thickly. The worst of the cold is easing. You sit up and let that small realization settle in your chest like sunlight. According to weather records kept by settlers, the turning point of winter was often subtle. It was not marked by warmth, but by rhythm. The air changed its tone. The trees groaned differently. The snow fell with less weight. People could feel the world shift even before they could see it. You sense that same change now, faint but real. The light feels kinder. You rise slowly, pulling on your thick wool shirt and boots. The air near the floor still holds a trace of chill, but it no longer bites. You stir the fire, uncovering a layer of glowing embers hidden beneath grey ash. They flare instantly, hungry for air. The smell of warm pine fills the cabin again, sweet and sharp. You add another log and listen as the flames begin their steady song. A curious entry from a Tennessee diary describes how settlers would test the coming thaw by tossing a handful of snow onto the hearth. If it melted fast and hissed loudly, spring was near. If it sat and steamed, the cold still ruled. You scoop a bit from the window ledge and drop it onto the coals. It vanishes almost at once, leaving a single bead of water that rolls away. You smile. Historians who studied early frontier life often wrote that hope arrived in whispers long before proof. A few birds returning, sap running in trees, or the sound of dripping water on the roof was enough to make people weep from relief. You hear that faint dripping now, a slow, steady rhythm from the eaves. It sounds like time beginning again. You open the door and step outside. The air is bright and cold, but not cruel. The snow reflects the light like glass, and for the first time in months, you can smell something new. It is faint, but unmistakable, the scent of wet earth beneath the melting drifts. The ground is waking. You kneel, press your glove into the snow, and feel a softness underneath, a promise of soil. A curious superstition from mountain farmers said that the earth had to breathe before spring could arrive. They claimed you could hear it sigh on mornings like this if you listened closely enough. You stay still for a while, and though you hear nothing but your own breath, you like the idea. Maybe the sigh is too soft for human ears. You walk a short distance from the cabin, the snow crunching under your boots. The world feels changed, though the difference is invisible. The sky has lost its hardness. The trees hold a faint shimmer of moisture on their branches. You tilt your face upward and let a bit of melting snow touch your lips. It tastes clean, almost sweet. A record from an old trapper describes the first thaw as both gift and warning. He wrote that the melting ice loosened everything: the ground, the rivers, even people's tempers. Cabin walls warped, stored food spoiled, and the long quiet gave way to restlessness. You understand that warning. After so many still days, movement feels strange. Even joy feels like work. You return to the cabin and set a pot of water to boil. The fire burns brightly now, throwing light onto the walls. The smoke smells less heavy than it did in the deep cold. You take out the last of your dried berries and drop them into the pot. The water turns pink, then red, a small sunrise in liquid form. Experts studying pioneer routines note how rituals marked the changing of seasons. A new fire, a fresh drink, a day spent sweeping soot from the hearth. All were signs that life was moving forward. You pick up the broom of dried twigs and begin sweeping. Ash and dust swirl up in small clouds, glowing in the light before they settle again. The sound of the broom brushing the floor is steady and satisfying. A strange little tradition from an Ohio family said that the first sweep of spring should be thrown outside before the sun touches it, or the winter would linger. You remember this, and open the door, tossing the small pile of ash into the snow. The wind carries it away instantly, scattering grey into white. It feels symbolic, though you never put much faith in omens. You sit again near the fire, cradling your cup of warm berry tea. The first sip floods your mouth with heat and faint sweetness. Outside, the snow still glitters, but you can see drops of water sliding from the roof, each one catching the light before falling. The sound is gentle, hypnotic. You realize how long it has been since you heard water move freely. In one of the oldest surviving letters from a frontier woman, she wrote that, "The first thaw feels like being forgiven." You think about that line now, letting it unfold slowly in your mind. Maybe she was right. The cold has not gone, but it no longer feels personal. It is just part of the rhythm that makes warmth matter. You lean back against the wall, feeling the cabin's rough texture against your shoulders. The animals below stir, restless now that they sense the change too. Somewhere in the distance, a tree cracks sharply, a branch falling as the frost releases its grip. The sound echoes through the forest like applause. You smile and take another sip of tea. The warmth settles deep inside you. The hardest part of winter is almost over. Soon there will be mud, then grass, then colour. For now, you are content to sit and listen to the slow return of the world. The fire hums softly, and outside, the first fragile sounds of spring continue their patient song. The air smells different today. When you wake, you can feel it before you even open your eyes. The cold is still there, but it no longer bites. It only lingers, shy and thin, like a guest who knows it has overstayed. You sit up, stretching your legs beneath the heavy blanket. The fire is nearly out, only a few orange glows pulsing beneath a layer of ash. For the first time in months, you are not in a hurry to feed it. According to the journals of settlers across the frontier, this was the time when life began to stir again. Water would drip from the eaves through the morning, and thin mist rose from the ground by afternoon. People spoke quietly, as if afraid to break the spell that winter had left behind. You sit listening to that same stillness now, a silence that feels softer, filled with breath instead of fear. You rise, walk to the window, and wipe the frost with your sleeve. The light outside glows pale gold. The snow is melting in patches, and beneath it you can see streaks of dark earth showing through. The forest looks alive again, its branches beaded with droplets of water. A single bird cries somewhere in the distance, sharp and sweet. The sound pierces the air like sunlight through glass. A curious entry in a frontier diary mentions how settlers would celebrate the first birdsong of spring as if it were a sermon. They believed it carried news from the warmer lands, proof that the earth was still turning. You close your eyes and listen. Another note follows, this one closer. The sound wraps around the cabin, bright as laughter. Experts have written that the final weeks of winter were often the hardest. The body had grown used to stillness, the mind to silence. Movement felt like betrayal, as if the cold might return for revenge. You understand that now as you pull on your boots and open the cabin door. The air outside rushes in, cold but full of scent. It smells of wet bark, melting snow, and faint decay, a living smell. You step out into the sunlight. The snow gives way beneath your feet, soft and slushy. Each step makes a squelching sound that feels like music. The wind is gentle today, brushing against your cheek with the warmth of breath. You stand still, closing your eyes, letting it move through your hair. A curious superstition recorded among mountain settlers said that when you could feel the wind without flinching, winter had truly ended. You test the idea, raising your face toward the Sunday. The warmth is faint but real. You can feel it settle on your eyelids, the first honest light in months. You smile. You walk a few steps farther, past the corner of the cabin, to where the ground slopes downward. Here the snow has melted enough to expose a patch of dark soil. It smells rich, sweet, and damp. You kneel and touch it with your bare fingers. The texture is cold but soft. You rub it between your palms until it leaves faint streaks of brown across your skin. This is what the settlers must have felt, the small, perfect miracle of living ground returning beneath their hands. A letter written by a farmer in 1803 described this same moment. I felt the world breathe again. You repeat that quietly to yourself, looking at the thin mist rising from the snowmelt. It does look like breath, curling and fading into the air. The land exhales, and you inhale, sharing the same rhythm. You return to the cabin slowly, each step careful through the softening snow. The door creaks when you open it, and the familiar smell of smoke greets you again. Inside, the fire has nearly died. You kneel, stir the ash, and coax a few last embers to life. The faint glow answers, reluctant but obedient. You add a small stick, watching the orange light pulse stronger for a moment before settling again. It is enough. Historians often write that warmth was never a permanent victory in those days, only a series of small, stubborn triumphs. You understand that now. Every fire you kept alive, every crack you sealed, every night you outlasted the wind, each was its own quiet rebellion. You sit at the hearth one last time, your hands folded in your lap. The animals below shift softly, still drowsy. The light through the window has turned honey gold. You take a slow breath, letting it fill your chest, and exhale. The air feels cleaner, lighter. You can almost taste spring. A final superstition comes to mind, one you remember reading long ago. It said that when the last snow melts from the roof, you should speak a word of gratitude to the fire, or next winter will be colder. You glance at the coals and whisper softly, "Thank you." The fire answers with a single, quiet pop. Outside, water drips steadily from the eaves, a rhythm like rain. The snow shimmers in the fading light, and the air hums faintly with the sound of life returning. Inside, the warmth lingers in your chest, steady and sure. You have survived the hush, the storms, the hunger, the silence. You have learned the language of fire and wind and smoke. You are no longer afraid of the cold. You lie back on your bed, letting the faint sunlight brush your face. The air smells of wood, earth, and time. The cabin creaks softly, as if sighing in relief. The world is still quiet, but it is no longer empty. It is resting. You close your eyes and let that thought carry you towards sleep. The warmth fades gently, leaving only calm. You breathe in, and the air feels lighter than it has in months. The world outside your window is quiet, but not frozen. It waits. The snow is melting, the trees are dripping, and the earth is loosening its grip on the cold. Everything slows to a softer rhythm, one that your body already knows. The fire hums faintly beside you, its glow no longer bright but steady. The room